Chapter 569. The southern side of the Midland continent was facing attacks from three countries. The first was the terrifying Russia, followed by Mongolia and finally Kazakhstan. Even though they were small in number, they were not weak at all, and they were much more powerful than the smaller countries. Each of them had at least one nation armament, while Russia had three. This time, they were attacking China from three different directions, and the most eye-catching one was Russia, led by Oleg, the legatee of the Kievan Rus dynasty. Kievan Rus was the first country that Russia had established, and it had an extremely high prestige in Russia. Oleg was a noble and elegant person, and he was like a true prince. After a system announcement sounded out, Oleg quickly gathered players from a few regions and started to attack China. Under Oleg's lead, 10 million Russian players started to attack. They were like a massive river at the boundary region, giving off a heaven-shaking aura as they charged towards the Chinese side's system main cities with an unstoppable momentum. The Chinese side's two system main cities players were not prepared at all, and seeing the Russian army suddenly attack, they looked quite afraid and planned to sue for peace. After all, they did not even have 5 million people, so how could they defend against Russia? The Russian player army had completely surrounded the Chinese side's system main cities. A Chinese faction's representative walked out and shakily walked over to a young man who was riding a large warhorse and wearing golden armor, and his body gave off a light. "Sir, can we resolve this peacefully? We'll give you anything you want," the person said carefully. Oleg elegantly looked at the Chinese person in front of him before looking to the side. The person next to him understood and immediately yelled, "Kneel! Who do you think you are to dare to stand and talk to His Majesty?" Hearing this, the Chinese representative's expression froze, and he hesitated before kneeling down and saying, "Your Majesty, is that fine now? We want peace. We don't want war." Oleg lightly laughed as he looked at the Chinese representative with his blue eyes and said, "You Chinese people are so soft and useless. You want to resolve this peacefully? That's impossible. You lowly people should be conquered by Russia. You can go back." The Chinese representative's expression became quite unsightly, and he wanted to say something, but the person next to him yelled, "You dog, hurry up and piss off. If you don't piss off, I'll kill you." The Chinese representative was so scared that he scrambled back to the system main city. Now, the Chinese people in the system main cities were in chaos, and some people yelled, "Just fight with them, we'll just die once. Damn it! Let them witness the power of Huaxia. How dare they insult Huaxia?" But some people also shouted, "Idiot! If you want to go, then go. I don't want to die. What can you people do other than shouting and killing? A bunch of brainless trash. Can't we resolve this peacefully?" Some other people also agreed. Yes, we have to be rational and not be impulsive. Look at our equipment and cultivation levels. It wasn't easy for us to raise our cultivation levels, and the things we obtain every day can be exchanged for quite a bit of money. If we don't live a good life, why should we fight them? If we die, we'll have nothing. Everyone else nodded and said, "Don't listen to those idiots. If they want to die, they can do it themselves. Don't drag us into it. If we die, we'll have to start all over again, and we won't be able to exchange money anymore. If we run out of money, our country's economy will decline. That's why we should defeat them economically. No smoke is the best kind of war. Those hot-blooded people, go die. The country doesn't need an idiot like you who keeps causing trouble for the country." After some discussion, 80% of the people were in favor of peace, and the few who wanted to fight were completely overshadowed by these people. They were criticized and insulted by the crowd, and in the end, they also gave up on the idea of fighting. Just as they were about to sue for peace again, in the main hall of Huaxia City, a city lord sighed and said, "We can't resist so many mutants. Let's open the absolute neutral mode." The others nodded and left. Within the system main city, The players felt their bodies be covered by a wave of energy, and their vision blurred before they appeared outside the system main city. A sturdy semicircular barrier covered the entire system main city. Absolute neutrality was a state that could be used when a large number of players attacked or when players rioted, allowing the system main city to remain neutral. In this state, a system main city would have a powerful barrier protecting it, but it would not protect anyone or attack anyone. If other system main cities or player factions attacked, they would not be able to use this neutral mode. System main cities that had fought before could not use this absolute neutral mode either. However, because of the shift in fate, all system main cities could use this absolute neutral mode. Because of the shift in fate, players would gather like a tide and cover the heavens and earth, causing great damage to countless system main cities. As such, the system would ensure the safety of the system main cities. Countless Chinese players were thrown outside, and they could not react in time. However, Oleg had been waiting for a long time, and rows of archers aimed at the dumbfounded Chinese players. Swish, 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 the sound of the air being torn could be heard as a black wave of arrows, giving off an incredibly sharp aura, descended like rain. Blood spurted everywhere, and cries sounded out. In just the first wave of arrows, 1/3 of the Chinese players had died. The cries of pain and blood caused countless people to come to their senses. They hurriedly picked up their shields to defend, and some people furiously rushed at the Russian players with weapons. Chi, 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 another wave of arrows descended, and countless Chinese players' bodies were pierced by countless arrows, making them look like a hornet's nest. Some people understood that they could not escape, so they continued to roar as they rushed at the Russian players. Some people knelt on the ground and cried out that they were willing to do anything. The Russian players mocked as they killed the Chinese players charging at them. They then looked at the Chinese players kneeling on the ground and looked at Oleg. Oleg raised his noble head and looked at the surrendered Chinese players with a trace of disgust as he said, "Our Russian players don't accept captives. These lowly Chinese people are as lowly as pigs. Kill them all. How disgusting!" Seeing that the Russian players were going to attack them, the Chinese players were so scared that they started to cry and beg. "Sir, we'll kowtow to you, please don't kill us. I actually have Russian blood in me, and I'm a Russian. I'm not a lowly Chinese person, please don't kill me." Chapter 570. No matter how they begged for mercy, Oleg's expression did not change at all. Countless arrows once again shot out, tearing through the air and killing countless Chinese players. In the end, the survivors understood that begging for mercy and surrendering was useless, so they could only run towards the system main city. Now that the system main city was surrounded, they definitely could not escape, so they tried to hide within the system main city. However, they were all blocked by the semicircular barrier, and these people begged the system main city to let them in. The system main city's city lord looked at the corpses outside the system main city. The ground was dyed red with blood, and weapons were scattered everywhere. The people had all died incredibly gruesome deaths, creating a terrifying scene that looked like hell on earth. Looking at the pleading people outside the system main city, the system main city's city lord could only sigh and ignore them. After all, if they were allowed in, they would lose their neutrality and might end up like them. As such, the system main city's city lord could only ignore their pleas. Oleg looked at the system main city and felt that it was quite a pity before saying, "Hurry and kill all of those Chinese players and clean up the battlefield. Before the Chinese players can react, we'll continue to attack the next region." The Russian players excitedly rushed up and easily killed the remaining Chinese players before looting the Chinese players' equipment. Looking at the countless Chinese players who had died, Oleg gave a satisfied smile. This was the first time he had fought against a foreign country, and he had obtained such a great harvest. He was greatly praised and worshipped by Russia. This was his first step in China, and after that, he would conquer China and kill all of those lowly Chinese players. When he thought about that, Oleg gave a confident smile. If it wasn't for the fact that China's internal war had caused a shift in fate and caused China to lose its protection, he would not have started to invade China so early on. Oleg could understand China's internal conflict. The appearance of a monster like Great Qin was simply too dangerous, and if they did not get rid of it, they would not be able to rest easy. As such, Oleg had provided some resources to help them destroy Great Qin. However, China had been too arrogant and overconfident, thinking that they wouldn't dare to invade China. Who wouldn't want to take a bite out of such a juicy piece of meat? System announcement. The Marquis Peak region has been conquered by Russia, and China's overall fate has decreased while Russia's overall fate has increased. This system announcement caused a trace of a smile to appear on Oleg's face. China's system main cities were now completely neutral, and they no longer protected Chinese people or belonged to China. Right now, they could only be considered neutral factions. Therefore, as long as they killed all the Huaxia people now, it would be equivalent to occupying a region. Countless Russian players looked incredibly excited as they looted the players' corpses. This would be a good harvest, and apart from the spoils of war, there were also 5 times the war points, which could be exchanged for many good items. After a while, the battlefield was cleaned up, and the Russian players followed Oleg's instructions to pile up the Chinese corpses into a mountain of corpses. They then planted their Russian flag on it. Just thinking about this made everyone feel proud and happy. This was because Russia wanted to trample on China's dignity, and let all of China know how powerful Russia was. Countless Russian players loudly laughed and felt their blood boil as they followed Oleg to the next region. The leader was a fierce-looking, well-built young man. His name was Tut, and his status in the Mongolian kingdom was quite high. Everyone looked at the Mongolian kingdom and saw that the leader was a fierce-looking and well-built young man. Because of Mongolia, most of its territory in the Heaven-Awakened world was plains, and Mongolian players all knew how to ride horses and shoot arrows. This was a big advantage, as it was much better than staying in a room and studying. The Mongols were mostly made up of cavalry, and they didn't have any other types of soldiers. Even though they didn't have many people, only about 5 million, they weren't weak at all. Their cavalry was sharp and fast, and it was very difficult for an ordinary army to defend against them. Tut led the Mongolian army like an arrow, destroying all enemies. The sound of tens of thousands of horses galloping shook the heavens and earth, giving off a ferocious and powerful aura. The situation at the boundary regions was the same as before, and there were less than 1.5 million players. After all, China's territory was simply too vast, and it was impossible for every system main city to have 1 million players. Regions with more fate spawned more players, while regions with less fate spawned fewer players. Facing the Mongolian army's ferocious charge, the system main city at the boundary region rationally became neutral, and all of the Chinese players were chased out. At first, the Chinese players didn't have time to react, but Tut and his army had already arrived. However, the Chinese side was split into 2 factions. One faction chose to fight. Even though they couldn't defeat the Mongolian army, they would still die with honor. The other faction chose peace, hoping to avoid war and preserve their own interests. After enjoying their current comfortable lives, most people chose to resolve this peacefully. However, they didn't have time to send people to negotiate. The Mongolian army was like a cold saber, and they gave off a thunderous aura as they charged into the Chinese players who wanted peace. Arg! Pained cries sounded out as countless Mongolian players charged on their horses and swung their sabers, killing all of the Chinese players in front of them. Warm blood splattered everywhere. One by one, the Chinese people fell like weeds. Some people chose to resist, while others chose to surrender. However, the Mongolian army didn't show any signs of stopping, and they gave off a ferocious aura as they charged forwards. The Chinese players were instantly destroyed, and they weren't able to stop the Mongolian army at all. the Mongolian army quickly inundated the remaining Chinese players. No matter if they surrendered or resisted, whether they were men or women, they were all killed. In just a short while, 1.5 million Chinese players had been slaughtered, and the Mongolian army hadn't suffered much damage at all. Following this, the Mongolian army started to clear the battlefield. Toot ordered his soldiers to cut off all of the Chinese players' heads and hang them on their horses. These were their spoils of war and symbolized their victory and power. Countless Mongolian players agreed with this idea, as they felt that hanging the Chinese players' heads on their horses was an incredibly glorious and invigorating thing. They had accumulated a great deal of hatred towards China, and now they were going to release it all at once. Very quickly. Chapter 571. System Announcement. The Nine Shepherds region has been conquered by Mongolia, and China's overall fate has decreased while Mongolia's overall fate has increased. Another system announcement sounded out, causing all of China to tremble. Back at Kazakhstan's attack, Kazakhstan was not very powerful, and it had never produced any famous kingdoms or historical figures. Moreover, it was quite inland and had many deserts. Most of its soldiers were infantrymen, and they had very few cavalrymen. In total, they had around 7 million soldiers, and there were exactly 1 million Chinese players in this region. It was impossible for them to defend against Kazakhstan's attack. Just like before, the two system main cities had become neutral, so a large number of Chinese players were unprepared and chased out. By now, they were being attacked by Kazakhstan. First, a wave of arrows rained down, catching the Chinese players off guard. The Chinese players were split into two factions, and they were unable to unite. Kazakhstan had already set up four shield walls, completely surrounding the Chinese players. Now, the Chinese players started to counterattack, but it was not very effective. Kazakhstan's four shield walls gradually closed in, and they started to shrink. The shield walls would suddenly stab out spears, killing Chinese players one by one. Countless Chinese players looked terrified as they slowly retreated. The Kazakhstan players continued to press forward, and the Chinese players' range of movement became smaller and smaller. In the end, they were squeezed together, and some of them were stabbed to death. They tried to break through the shield walls, but they were unable to do anything. Many people started to kneel and surrender, and the Kazakhstan players did not kill them. In the end, most of the Chinese players were killed, and only 20,000 or so Chinese players were captured. The Chinese captives thought that the Kazakhstan players would spare them, and they thanked them profusely. However, their fates did not change at all. The Kazakhstan players were led by a man with yellow skin and a sinister-looking face. He was called Kegur, and looking at the Chinese corpses being massacred, he felt incredibly delighted and carefree. Their country did not have any famous people, nor did it have any world-shaking events. As such, they did not have much of a presence in the rest of the world, so Kegur wanted to change this. This time, China, the number one country in the world, had a shift in fate, which was a great opportunity. This time, he wanted to lead the Kazakhstan players to the pinnacle of glory and let the world know of Kazakhstan's name. As such, he had to successfully invade China and defeat the Chinese players. Only by standing above the Chinese players would he be able to receive attention. As such, looking at the Chinese corpses, Kegur felt incredibly happy, as this was the first step towards fulfilling his dream. "Sir, what about the Chinese captives? Are you really going to let them off?" a person asked as he walked over to Kegur. How could he let the Chinese people off? Killing them would give him 5 times the reward. Even if he didn't kill them, the others would definitely not let them off. In order to celebrate this victory, Czechoslovakia decided to hold a simple hunting competition to raise the morale of the Kazakh people. Of course, the targets of the competition were the Chinese people. The Chinese captives didn't have a single piece of equipment on them. They only had clothes on them, and they were brought to the front by the thousands. The Chinese players did not understand what the Kazakhstan players were doing, and they were sent out 1,000. Jack laughed as he loudly said, "This is a special hunting event. As long as you hit a Chinese player, not only will you receive 5 times the reward, but I will also personally award you 10 silver coins." The crowd was in an uproar, and countless people excitedly requested to participate. The Czechs randomly chose 1,000 people and stood 100 meters behind the Chinese. Seeing the Kazakhstan players draw their bows, the remaining Chinese players understood that they did not want to let them off. As such, they tried to resist and run, but they did not have anything on them, and those who resisted were killed. In order to prevent this event from continuing, Great God gave the Chinese players some hope. If they could escape from the hunters, they would be spared. If they resisted, they would die, and if they participated, they would have a chance at survival. The Chinese players could only endure the humiliation and remain as prey for the Kazakhstan players to hunt. Following this, the hunt began. The Chinese players at the front quickly ran, while the Kazakhstan players drew their bows and started to shoot. Arrows flew out, piercing through many Chinese players' bodies. Some people were instantly killed, while others were still alive and howled on the ground. Some people tried to run and crawled on the ground with great difficulty. Seeing this, the countless Kazakhstan players loudly laughed. The few people who were able to escape were filled with terror as they continued to run. Now they had to face the majority of the archers. The rules were that after shooting one person, they could continue to shoot a second person. Because they were only 100 meters away, they had a few chances to shoot. Very few people were able to escape, and most of them were killed. Kostya did not chase after those who managed to escape. It was as if he had released a few bugs. After this event, the Kazakhstan players were incredibly enthusiastic, and they continued to follow Kostya to attack the next region. System announcement. The Sand region has been conquered by Kazakhstan. China's overall fate has decreased, while Kazakhstan's overall fate has increased. These 3 countries had been the first to attack, and they had attacked incredibly quickly and ferociously. The Chinese side had not been able to react in time and had been heavily attacked. However, at that time, the Chinese side had not sensed the danger yet, and they had thought that it was just a few countries that hated China and had started to invade. However, they had never thought that the invasion would be so all-out, and it was incredibly ferocious. Back then, many people still wanted to maintain peace and wanted to resolve this peacefully. After all, Chinese people valued peace, and this sort of invasion was incredibly disadvantageous to China. China was in a disadvantageous position, so for their own interests, they did not want to start a war. Before the 3 countries' system announcements sounded out, the other countries had also started to invade, but they were not as fast. This was only the southern side of the Midland continent. Zhao Fu did not think too much about this, and Qin was not at the border, so he did not have to worry about invading Qin's territory for a while. However, Zhao Fu understood how important this shift in fate was, so he discussed it with his generals and made some important decisions. He also made some preparations and defenses. Being prepared for danger in times of peace was very important to the survival of a kingdom. Zhao Fu's eyes lit up. Because Zhao Fu's body was still quite weak, it was difficult for him to even walk by himself, and he could not go anywhere. As such, he could only listen to the reports. Chapter 572. The east side of China was mainly attacked by North Korea, Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Some of these 6 countries had enmity with China not only in the heaven-awakened world but also in the real world, and there were often conflicts and territorial dispute. If he was already like this usually, then this time around, he would definitely take revenge crazily, and his methods would be even more cruel. The first to attack was Korea. They gathered 6 million players and ferociously attacked. Similarly, the system main cities here became neutral and chased out all of the Chinese players. However, this time, the Chinese players had learned their lesson. Because of what had happened in the south, after hearing that South Korea was attacking, they immediately chose to run. Because there were less than 1 million Chinese people here, they naturally couldn't stop them, so they could only choose to escape. However, they had also contacted the nearby regions, wanting to join forces to resist the invasion of the Goryans. However, none of the regions had agreed to come. There were still quite a number of people who thought that it was none of their business. Since the attack was not in their area, there was no need for them to go through so much trouble and come here to fight to the death. If they died, they would lose everything. How much money would they lose? Moreover, they could not ask for reimbursement from anyone. Some people were filled with hot blood and wanted to come, but they were not prepared enough. Even if they rushed over, the frigid kingdom would have already massacred the region, so they did not come in the end and planned to build defenses in their region. This time, the one leading them was Pu Xuehue. Even though she was a woman, she was an important figure in South Korea and had a very high status. She was also very beautiful and was liked by many people in South Korea. In the beginning, Pu Xuehue had been quite excited to lead the army here, as this was time to prove the great glacial nation's name. They wanted the entire world to see how powerful the great glacial nation was, and they wanted the entire world to submit to them. However, when they arrived, they found that most of the Chinese people had fled, making Pu Xuehue feel quite disappointed. Only by slaughtering a large number of Chinese people would they be able to display their strength. But now, the Chinese had run away. What should we do with them? Park Xuehue was unwilling to accept this outcome. She gave the order to chase after them, and in the end, they managed to capture 3,000 Chinese who were too slow to escape. Seeing these 3,000 Chinese people, Pu Xuehue smiled and ordered them to be brought over. Seeing the large number of Goryans around them, the 3,000 Chinese players felt quite afraid, and they stood in front of Pu Xuehue. Pu Xuehue spoke up, "You despicable Chinese people, I'll tell you right now that my Han nation is the origin of all Eastern culture. You shameless Chinese people actually dare to say that our culture is your own? How shameful! You are thieves who stole from us. This also shows that you have a despicable bloodline. In history, you were the slaves of the Great Cold. Now you have the blood of the slaves. From now on, you should recognize the Great Cold as your master. The Great Cold is superior to your lowly Chinese people. Do you understand now? Understand your sister. Do you have any shame? Brainless girl. You've never learned real history, have you? He's just an idiot, so disgusting." Many people angrily cursed at Pu Xuehue. Goryan was just a small country, and it had always been China's vassal. Now that their economy had developed, they dared to steal Chinese culture and call it their own. They were simply too shameless. Pu Xuehue's peerlessly beautiful face became cold, and she immediately said, "Drag out those people who cursed at us. Behead them all." The surrounding Goryans had long since disliked the Chinese people, and they immediately went up and dragged out the Chinese people before forcing them to kneel on the ground. They swung their swords, and heads fell to the ground, blood flowing out of their necks. This caused the remaining Chinese people's faces to turn pale, and their bodies started to tremble in fear. As long as you admit that you Chinese people are lowly existences, that you're the slaves of the Great Cold, that you stole our culture, and that you're shameless, I'll spare you," Pu Xuehue said as she looked at the Chinese people in front of her. Of the 3,000 or so Chinese people, 2,000 had been beheaded, and only 1,000 remained. Of these 1,000 people, some started to curse at Pu Xuehue before being dragged out and killed. In the end, there were only 500 or so Chinese people left. Looking at the beheaded corpses, a skinny and weak-looking young man said in fear, "Is this true? As long as we admit it, you'll spare us?" A trace of a smile appeared on Pu Xuehue's face as she said, "Of course. As long as you admit it, I'll spare you." "Very well. I admit that the Great Cold is the most outstanding, and we Chinese people are your slaves. We stole your culture," the skinny and weak-looking young man said nervously. The countless Goryans happily laughed, and Pu Shuhui also smiled as she nodded and said, "You can leave now." Hearing her words, the skinny and weak-looking young man was delighted and quickly ran to the side. Seeing him wretchedly run away, the Goryans laughed in ridicule. In their eyes, this Chinese person was no different from an animal. Seeing that someone had really run away, the others quickly admitted, "The Goryans are the largest country in the world, and we're not as powerful as you. It was us Chinese people who stole your things. We're despicable." Ha ha ha. The countless Goryans laughed, and the remaining Chinese people looked around nervously and fearfully. Pu Shuhui nodded in satisfaction and said, "You can all leave now." The other Chinese people felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders and immediately ran away. However, because some people did not admit it, they were directly killed. Of the 3,000 people, only 400 Chinese people managed to escape in humiliation. Pu Shuhui gave a happy smile. This was what she wanted. She wanted these Chinese people, who thought so highly of themselves, to admit that they were Goryans' slaves. However, since most of the Chinese people had run away, Pu Shuhui could only use another method, which was to change their target. Pu Shuhui ordered people to start searching for Chinese indigenous villages. With 6 million people spread out, it was quite easy to find villages, so the Goryans found many villages. Following this, Pu Shuhui ordered people to take down these villages and announced her plan. She was going to implement Chinese slavery, which meant that all Chinese people would become slaves. Even though it was impossible for players to do that, they could capture Chinese indigenous residents. Chapter 573. System Announcement. The ocean region has been conquered by Gorya. China's overall fate has decreased, while Gorya's overall fate has increased. As countless Chinese people retreated from the region, the Goryans easily took over the region, and it now belonged to Gorya. Now, Gorya was implementing a system of slavery, continuously capturing Chinese indigenous residents and bringing them to Gorya as slaves to serve them. Then, they turned their attention to Japan. Japan was the most perverted country in the world, and their methods were incredibly cruel, making countless Chinese people furious. The leader of the Japanese army was Oda Kamiya, who was Oda Nobunaga's descendant. As Oda Nobunaga's descendant, he was greatly respected by countless Japanese people. His performance in the beginning was quite good, but as Qin-Qin's rise, his performance became worse and worse. However, he wasn't really that bad compared to Qin-Qin's legatee. He was nothing. He had also suffered a heavy blow, so he had disappeared with the demonic blade for a period of time. Recently, with the shift in fate, he had finally seen an opportunity, so he had returned. In actuality, he had seen Qin-Qin's legatee, his greatest rival, suffer a backlash from the heaven and earth fate. Even though he didn't know if he was dead or alive, he definitely wouldn't have a good time. After all, the backlash from the heaven and earth fate wasn't something that ordinary people could endure, and this gave him an opportunity to rise again. In actuality, they hadn't dared to directly invade before, and they had prepared for a long time before doing so. This was because many people feared Qin's name. Not only were the dynasty legatees threatened by it, but they were also greatly threatened. As such, the rest of the world had actively participated in destroying it. Now that Qin's fate had been used up, it was undoubtedly on the verge of collapse. They didn't dare to make any big moves, and Qin's legatee had been heavily injured. Without Qin's threat, only then did the rest of the world dare to invade. Right now, Oda Kamiya's appearance had changed. His eyes were completely blood-red, and there were 2 fangs in his mouth. His appearance contained a trace of savageness, and he looked like a monster. Oda Kamiya had returned, and he had obtained even greater power. He had led 10 million Japanese people and gave off terrifying auras as they flooded into China. However, the Chinese people in this region had long since heard about this, and they had all escaped. Even if Oda Kamaya wanted to, he could not catch many, making him feel quite angry. He had come excitedly, but he had not killed a single Chinese person. Finally, Oda Kamaya turned his attention to the Chinese natives and gave the order to search for Chinese villages. Very soon, because there were so many of them, the Japanese discovered many indigenous villages. Oda Kamaya didn't want to spare any of these indigenous people who spoke the Chinese language and had the same culture and customs as the Chinese. Even though they were not true Chinese people, they would definitely be Chinese people in the future. After the heaven-awakened world fused with the real world, the indigenous residents would also fuse with the people in the real world. As such, Oda Kamaya did not have any good feelings towards them. Thus, none of Oda Kamaya's orders were good. Countless Japanese soldiers laughed lustfully as they charged into the villages, killing all the men, elderly, and children before pouncing on the women. "My lord, please don't hurt my family, I surrender. I'll kowtow to you." Many of the aboriginals couldn't resist and couldn't bear to see their family killed, so they could only choose to surrender. They weren't players who could endlessly revive after dying, but if they died, they would die. Oda Kamaya looked at an honest-looking middle-aged man desperately kowtowing in front of him, crying as he begged Oda Kamaya to spare his family. In response, Oda Kamaya coldly smiled as he drew the demon saber at his waist, walked over, and slashed the middle-aged man in half, causing blood to spurt everywhere. Warm blood splattered all over Oda Kamaya's face, but he didn't feel any guilt at all. Instead, he felt incredibly delighted, as all Chinese people deserved to die. Oda Kamaya turned to look at the middle-aged man's wife. She was quite good-looking, and Oda Kamaya grabbed her and pressed her against the ground outside the house. He ignored her cries and begging as he tore off her clothes and started to f***ck her in broad daylight in front of everyone. The other Japanese soldiers also lewdly laughed as they searched for other women. The villages they found definitely didn't have that many women, so it was usually 20 or so men surrounding a woman and f***ing her. What's more, they didn't let off a single woman. Women over 50 years old and girls as young as 7 or 8 years old were all violated by them. The older women could take it, but the younger girls' bodies hadn't developed yet, and many of them died. However, the Japanese soldiers didn't even spare the corpses of the younger girls and continued to f***ck them. Afterwards, the Japanese soldiers didn't kill the women and instead drove them out. All of the women's eyes were empty and numb, and their bodies were covered with liquid. Oda Kamaya had to bring these women back to Japan because he wanted to implement a female slave system. All Chinese women would become female slaves for the Japanese soldiers to satisfy their desires. They would be locked in cages, and only the man who wanted them could f***ck them for free. They didn't care what they did, and even if they died, it wouldn't matter. Some high-quality female slaves would be treated as pets, and a rope would be tied around their necks. They would be forced to crawl on the ground like dogs, and of course, they could continue to be used to satisfy their desires. In fact, they could even be considered humans or beasts. After all, the Japanese soldiers didn't view these female slaves as humans, and they were no different from beasts. They could do whatever they wanted with them. It was a pity that they could only do this to indigenous residents. Players could commit suicide, but they wouldn't die a true death. However, after the heaven-awakened world devoured the real world, they would do the same to Chinese women and turn them into female slaves. The Japanese soldiers didn't hide their intentions and announced the female slave system. They wanted to turn all Chinese women into female slaves for them to play with, and they even showed off the result. This caused countless Chinese people to feel furious. Even though the indigenous residents weren't players, they were still part of China. Seeing their own people being treated like this, many people were naturally furious. This was especially so for the Chinese women. They felt incredibly furious towards the Japanese soldiers and wanted to bite them to death. Flower Moon, one of the largest factions in China, was preparing to make a move against the Japanese soldiers. They only had two thoughts: defend against the Japanese soldiers and ask Qin to hand over Flower Moon. Chapter 574. System Announcement. The Withered Tree region has been conquered by Japan. China's overall fate has decreased, while Japan's overall fate has increased. This region was easily conquered by Japan, and a few other countries began to invade, including North Korea, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Out of these four countries, the Philippines was relatively powerful and had territorial disputes with China, so there was a great enmity between the two sides. However, they were not as arrogant as South Korea or as perverted as Japan. Their way of invading was more direct and bloody, and they did the same thing as the southern continent. The Philippines had 10 million or so people invading, and they gave off a terrifying aura. They flooded into a region, wanting to kill all Chinese players. There were roughly 1 million Chinese players in this region, and after hearing about this, most of them chose to escape to other regions. However, a small portion of them chose to stay and counterattack. Even though they knew that they would definitely die, they were filled with bloodlust and were not rational. If they were rational, they would have chosen not to resist and directly run away. After all, this invasion would only bring them great losses, and the situation would be quite disadvantageous to them. As such, they could only choose not to fight, and in order to protect their own interests, they chose to retreat. This was indeed quite rational, when they had allied together to destroy Great Qin, because there were all sorts of benefits and rewards. They had passionately participated without any hesitation. However, facing this kind of invasion, there were no benefits at all, so they chose to retreat. As such, those who stayed were filled with bloodlust and decided to do everything they could to defend their country's territory and not be humiliated by anyone. However, out of the 1 million people, only 150,000 or so people remained. However, the result was quite obvious. 150,000 people against 10 million people had no hope at all. The two Chinese system main cities also became neutral and chased out all of the Chinese players. The remaining 150,000 people had lost their final stronghold, so they decided to use the familiar terrain to engage in guerrilla warfare. However, reality was cruel. Guerrilla warfare was only slightly effective against Country F's army, while they were facing an ocean of people that seemed to be able to devour everything. As such, they were quickly surrounded. After being surrounded, the Chinese players started to ferociously counterattack, but soon, they were killed by Country F's army. Country F's army also captured a small number of surviving Huaxia citizens. At this time, the surviving Huaxia citizens would not surrender and were all captured by force. Against the Chinese who dared to resist, Adela, the leader of Country F, used bloody methods in hopes of reducing the morale of the Chinese and making the following battles easier. Therefore, these people who were captured died miserably. All of them were skinned and hung on trees. Moreover, their bodies were smeared with something similar to honey, allowing countless insects to bite at their bodies. Mournful screams rang out continuously. This area was also successfully occupied. Adela led the F army and continued to invade the next area. The remaining 3 countries were relatively weaker. North Korea sent 4 million people, Indonesia sent 5 million people, and Malaysia sent 5 million people. The 3 countries had already joined forces because not only were they outnumbered, but their battle prowess was also lower than that of ordinary people. If it wasn't for the fact that so many countries were invading China, they wouldn't have dared to do such a thing. They wanted to borrow the strength of the other countries to invade China and obtain some benefit. Their plan was quite successful. They split into 3 groups and attacked from 3 different directions, forming an encirclement. This was not any weaker than an attack from a large country, and not a single Chinese player dared to stay. Naturally, they were able to easily conquer the three regions. System announcement. The Spring region has been conquered by North Korea, and China's overall fate has decreased while North Korea's overall fate has increased. System announcement. The Crimson region has been conquered by Malaysia, and China's overall fate has decreased while Malaysia's overall fate has increased. System announcement. Many regions have been conquered by Indonesia, and China's overall fate has decreased while Indonesia's overall fate has increased. The notifications from the government stung the minds of all the Chinese people. Only now did they understand how serious the situation was, and they hurriedly reacted. They were no longer in a comfortable mood. After making some arrangements in the Heaven Awakened world, Zhao Fu returned to the real world. Because he did not have enough information in the Heaven Awakened world, he could only return to the real world. Zhao Fu knew that the shift in fate would cause China to become a juicy piece of meat, and anyone would want to take a bite out of it. The situation in China was quite urgent, so he had to return to the real world to take a look at the situation. After returning to the real world, a sense of weakness and pain flooded into his mind. It seemed that his body in the real world had suffered a backlash from the heaven and earth fate and had become weak and painful. Zhao Fu had expected this, but because the Phoenix Chi helped his body recover, Zhao Fu was able to do some simple things. Zhao Fu called Mu Gillen over and had him give him all of the information. At the same time, he found out that many people wanted to see him, such as the family leaders, Flower Moon, Feng Xiu, and the White Lotus Society's people. Zhao Fu knew what their goal was, but he did not want to see a single one of them, nor did he want to explain. The family leaders, Feng Xiu, and the White Lotus Society's people had most likely come because of those system announcements. The system announcements had already stated that Qin's fate had been used up and that Qin's legatee had suffered a backlash. With such a big matter, they were definitely quite worried and wanted to know about Qin's situation. However, with how weak Zhao Fu was, it was best for him not to see them. He was already quite weak, so it would not be easy for him to talk to them, and he did not want to arouse their suspicions. As for why Flower Moon's people had come to find him, Zhao Fu did not need to think to understand why, so he did not want to see them. After looking through all of the information, Zhao Fu finally understood the situation in Huaxia. He had never thought that it would be so serious, and a trace of anger appeared on Zhao Fu's face towards the various countries' actions. After all, Qin was also a member of China, and what they had done was equivalent to slapping Qin in the face. Because Qin was in the northern part of China, the northern countries' invasions were relatively gentle, as they were afraid of angering Qin and causing him to take revenge. Because the northern part had become quite weak due to the recent events, it was difficult for them to defend against invasions. Back then, Zhao Fu had only heard about the battles in the northern part of China, and only now did he understand how serious the situation was. Chapter 575. To the west of China, there were mainly Kyrgyzstan, Thailand, India, Indonesia, Thailand, and Bangladesh. In total, there were 8 countries attacking. China's greatest enemy was India. India's population was not inferior to China's, and it might even surpass China's. After all, India's economy was quite backward, and they had not done a full census yet. Anyone who had been to India before would know that India's capital was like a small Chinese county. It could be seen how backward India's economy was. Moreover, it was a country with many religions, and some countries forbade abortions. Moreover, some people's consciousness was poor, so they often gave birth. On the other hand, China had long since made plans. On the surface, China had the advantage in terms of population, but in actuality, it was not clear who had more people. Apart from population, it was also about culture and history. India was one of the 4 great civilizations, and it had a clan armament and a few famous dynasties. If it wasn't for the fact that India had been invaded many times and its culture and history had been destroyed many times, India's fate would have been immense. Currently, China was also being invaded, and if they were unable to defend, they would end up like India. Putting aside the other countries, just the Indian kingdom alone had gathered 30 million people and split them into 3 groups. Their auras were like shocking tsunamis, and they gave off destructive power as they easily slaughtered 3 regions. The person leading them was the Maurya dynasty's legatee, Shama. Not only did he bring his nation armament, the pillar of Ashoka, but he also brought his clan armament to invade China. Just thinking about this was terrifying enough. Apart from India, China also had to face 7 other countries in the south. From this, one could imagine how intense the battles in the south would be. System announcement. The Dudo region has been conquered by India, and China's overall fate has decreased while India's overall fate has increased. System announcement. The Source region has been conquered by India, and China's overall fate has decreased while India's overall fate has increased. System announcement. The Great Bright region has been conquered by India, and China's overall fate has decreased while India's overall fate has increased. System announcement. The Road region has been conquered by Ukraine, and China's overall fate has decreased while Ukraine's overall fate has increased. The system announcements continuously stabbed at the Chinese people's mind. Almost all of China's borders had been lost, and even though China's territory was many times that of other countries, they could not afford to lose so much. Every bit of land represented a bit of fate, and now that so much of China had been taken over by others, it was a heavy blow to China. However, the situation would definitely not continue like this. In the beginning, there were many border areas in Huaxia, and the population was small. Moreover, they were not prepared, so they were caught off guard for a while. It was only right that they were slaughtered. However, things were different now. The government had stood out and called for all Chinese people to resist the invasion. With the government taking the lead, the people also actively participated. Moreover, the government also made a lot of announcements to let ordinary people understand that there was no way to reconcile. China had no way out, and they could only choose to fight or be slaughtered. This forced countless people who did not want to participate to participate. Of course, they did not want to be slaughtered, so they could only unite together to defend against the invasions of other countries. China's 100 schools of thought and various large sects also took the initiative to join. Now that their country was in danger, these people felt incredibly patriotic. Even though they did not want to fight for supremacy, they would not allow anyone to invade China. The government also met with the various dynasty legatees and factions, sincerely begging them to join the defense. The various dynasty legatees and factions also took the initiative. After all, if other countries invaded, they would be the ones who would be harmed the most, so they had to participate. Otherwise, their fate would decrease, and they would be easily destroyed. The government even shamelessly invited Qin to participate. The invitation was sent to the Ying family. Even though they could not invite Qin's legatee, they wanted to invite Zhao Fu to go. They said that they had to put aside their conflicts, disputes, and hatred to work together to defend against the invasion. Zhao Fu could not help but coldly laugh. Why didn't they say this when they had allied together to destroy Qin? Not only had they suppressed Qin, but they had also expelled him from China and called him a demon. As such, Zhao Fu did not accept the invitation and ordered his people to return it. Moreover, this invasion was not something that Zhao Fu could change by himself. How could Zhao Fu stop it? This invasion was all-encompassing, and there were hundreds of millions of people. How could Zhao Fu stop it with his strength? Should he summon the 6 paths demon images again? Most likely, everyone would die together, and the 4 guardian beasts would not allow it. At the same time, it would be difficult for Zhao Fu to summon the 6 paths demon images again. After they had been killed last time, he had left a mark on the six paths demon images' true bodies, making it difficult for them to be summoned again. Or should he ask the Sky Desolation Azure Dragon for help? Of course, that was impossible, as this was a major event in history. As a guardian, it could only ensure that the Heaven Awakened world was not destroyed. Even if China was destroyed this time, it would not care. Zhao Fu had no other choice. Now that Qin had used up all of his fate, Zhao Fu did not want to make any big movements, as he was afraid of harming his foundations. Some people even said that if they collapsed, they would go and take revenge on others. Thinking about it like that might feel good, but in reality, such a country would have already been destroyed. This was a very foolish thing to do, and even though it would feel good, the outcome would still be tragic. Moreover, this invasion was actually quite beneficial to Qin. The various dynasty legatees and factions would not have the ability to attack Qin, as they did not have the time or energy to do so. Otherwise, if they gathered countless ordinary people to attack, Zhao Fu would have no choice but to hole up within Qin city. Of course, it was very difficult to gather so many people in the northern side, as they had already been heavily injured by Qin many times. Now each region had 1.5 million players, which was already quite large. As such, there was no need to worry about them allying together and using ordinary people to destroy Qin. Moreover, this was a very good thing for Qin. They had allied together to destroy Qin, and now that they had been invaded, it was their retribution. If it wasn't for the fact that the actions of the various countries were incredibly disgusting and infuriating, this would have been something to be happy about. By attacking each other, they were exhausting each other's strength, and this was a good thing for Great Qin. When Great Qin destroyed them, it would be much easier for Great Qin to destroy them. Zhao Fu decided not to participate, as he did not have the ability to do so, and it would be beneficial to Qin. Chapter 576. As such, Zhao Fu would definitely be angry about this invasion. However, as a Chinese person, he would not participate, and he would wait for Qin to take revenge on them. In fact, he could even create an even bigger China, or perhaps the entire world could be called China. It was possible that everyone could be Great Qin's subjects, and everyone could be called Qin people. The 100 schools of thought sighed that Qin was not participating. After all, with Qin's strength, just Qin's aura alone would be enough to intimidate many people. However, the dynasty legatees and dynasty legatees did not mind. The dynasty legatees and dynasty legatees hoped that Qin would join. One more person meant one more power. However, if Qin did not come, there was nothing they could do. The various dynasty legatees and nation legatees did not want Great Qin to get involved, so they wanted to suppress Great Qin with their reputation. After they recovered, they would suppress Great Qin again. This time, they had already dealt a heavy blow to Great Qin, and Great Qin would not be able to endure this for much longer. As various factions and ordinary people joined in, even though they had been caught off guard and had not been able to react in time, the situation was now different, and China started to retaliate. Countless Chinese people, led by the school of Moism's Zhan Holong, flooded into a region and used mud, stones, and trees to build a very long defensive wall. They also prepared many cavalrymen and countless fatal traps. These traps were very simple, but they were very effective. They were also relatively lethal, causing many Russians to fall for them. Seeing this scene, Oleg had to stop and did not continue to attack. Even though Russia had an advantage in numbers, China had the terrain advantage, and if they rashly attacked, they would suffer great losses. Oleg took out a map and found that there were many mountains on both sides, and the terrain was quite dangerous. He could only retreat and attack from the other side. However, if he retreated, the Chinese people would ferociously chase after him, putting Russia at a disadvantage. If they attacked, they would also suffer great losses. As such, he could only wait for the Russian people to gather together and break through the defensive wall. Now, he could only stay where he was, and Oleg coldly harumphed. Who would have thought that these lowly Chinese people would react so quickly? The Chinese side did not dare to attack rashly. At this time, the Russian and Huaxia armies were in a stalemate. Neither side dared to attack rashly. The Russians were constantly pouring in from the back, while the Huaxia side was constantly strengthening their defenses and gathering more people. The Mongolian cavalry was incredibly terrifying, and they were like a surging river. They gave off a ferocious aura and were incredibly fast, charging at everything in their path. Before the Chinese side could even set up their defenses, they had already been destroyed by the Mongolian cavalry. Almost all of the Mongolians were cavalry, and they were incredibly fast. Moreover, their battle intents were incredibly strong, and if they fought head-on, China would be at a disadvantage. Firstly, China's battle awareness was weaker, and they did not have that many warhorses to fight against the Mongolians. The commander in charge of this operation was called Hong Chang, and he was also from the school of the military. He was quite famous, and he was definitely not weak. Since China was unable to quickly set up defenses, they could only use another method. He ordered his men to set up countless ropes to trip the horses, as well as countless iron nails. At first, the Mongolian soldiers were like a sharp sword, charging forward with irresistible force. Because of their previous victories, they had been slightly careless. They had thought that the Chinese people were all incredibly weak and could not resist at all, so they had directly charged into the trap. Bang, 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 countless warhorses in front of them were tripped, and both men and horses heavily fell to the ground. Many people fell to their deaths, and many horses' legs were broken. Most people didn't even have time to react, and because of inertia, they continued to rush forward, tripping over each other. In an instant there were many casualties. Some horses stepped on iron nails, and the intense pain caused them to lose control. They could not pull their hands out, so they could only lie on the ground or madly run until they were numb from the pain. These traps caused the charging Mongolian army to immediately stop, and they looked at the Chinese people furiously. They felt that the Chinese people were too despicable, and they did not dare to fight them head-on. Instead, they had to resort to such underhanded method. The Mongolian army's greatest advantage was their warhorses, and now that their warhorses were restricted, the Mongolian army's sharpness and momentum were stopped. Their battle strength would be halved, and if they could stop their momentum, the Mongolian army would be much less of a threat. The Chinese side also had time to set up their defenses. Facing the Mongolian army, it was best to defend. Unless the Chinese side had a large number of cavalry or archers with high cultivation, they would not be able to counterattack. Otherwise, with China's weak will to fight, and without any good countermeasures, they would definitely lose against the Mongolian army. Now, Zhao Fu turned to look at the Hassa army. Because the Hassa army was mainly made up of infantry, their speed of advancing was quite slow. This time, they were led by a general called Lu Sanfei, who had much battle experience. Facing the Hassa army, the Chinese side had gathered 5 million or so people, while the Hassa army had 7 million people. The Chinese side was at a disadvantage, as there was a gap of 2 million people between them. In order to make up for this gap, Lu Sanfei decided to split into 3 groups and attack. Even though they did not have many people, if they could confuse them, they would be able to deal great damage and repel a larger number of enemies. The strategy was quickly carried out. Lu Sanfei began to lure the Hassa Empire's army, and then the Hassa Empire's army would attack them. Of course, it would be a 3-pronged attack. Blood and flesh flew everywhere, and cries continuously sounded out. The stench of blood started to spread, and in the end, the Hassa army retreated. 500,000 or so people had died, and the Chinese side had lost roughly 100,000 people. Of course, the Hassa army temporarily retreated a few hundred kilometers and set up defenses to defend against the Chinese side's attacks while waiting for the Hassa army to arrive. The Chinese side did not dare to continue attacking, as the other side already had the advantage in numbers. If they continued to attack, they would definitely lose, so the Chinese side also set up defenses. The situation in the southern side was like this, and it was now in a stalemate. Both sides continuously sent more and more people over, and the battles in the future would become more and more intense. In the eastern continent, facing off against the arrogant South Korea and Japan, the Chinese side retaliated. Chapter 577. The commander of the Goryeo army was a historical general, and because a nation legacy was nearby, the army was given to him to command. The Chinese side had gathered 5 million or so people, while the Goryeo army had 6 million. Even though there were 5 million fewer people, the Chinese side's morale was incredibly high. After all, what the Goryeo army had done before was simply too infuriating. They had actually dared to enslave all Chinese people, and such humiliation would make any Chinese person feel angry. Before, they did not have the strength to resist, but now they had gathered an army. As such, most people wanted to give the Goryeo army a good beating, so their morale was incredibly high. They did not want to defend and directly fought. This time, they did not use any tactics and simply gathered their troops, forming a massive flood that gave off terrifying auras as they ferociously rushed towards the Goryeo army. The Goryeo army had not been in this region for long, and facing so many Chinese people, they did not show any weakness at all. After all, they also wanted to kill the Chinese people. They gathered together and gave off a massive aura as they rushed towards the incoming Chinese army. Boom! The two armies intensely clashed, resulting in a massive explosion. The Chinese people were furious and roared as they swung their weapons at each other, and the Goryeo people savagely also swung their weapons at the Chinese people. The battlefield was incredibly chaotic, and blood continuously flew everywhere as cries continuously sounded out. The sound of weapons clashing was incredibly loud, and people continuously fell. Charge! Kill all of these shameless Goryeo people! A manly young man held a large saber as he chopped down a Goryeo person in front of him and stepped on him as he yelled. This greatly boosted morale, and many people felt hot blood fill their bodies. They were no longer afraid, and they fought incredibly valiantly. The Goryeo people furiously yelled, "The Goryeo people are invincible! Kill all of these Chinese people!" The battle between the two armies became even more intense, and saber lights and sword images continuously flashed as blood continuously flew everywhere. The cries and deaths did not stop, and corpses gradually covered the ground. In the end, the Goryeo army lost 3 million soldiers and was forced to retreat. Because many more Chinese people flooded in, the Chinese army lost 6 million soldiers. Even though they had lost a lot of soldiers, they had forced the Goryeo people into retreat. The Goryeo army retreated to the boundary region and started to build defenses, waiting for the Goryeo people to arrive. The Chinese side did not continue to chase and started to build defenses to defend against the large-scale invasion. Then, he turned his attention to the battle in Japan. This time, they didn't use any tactics and directly fought. Both sides' battle power was about the same, and their battle wills were also quite powerful. In the end, both sides suffered heavy losses. But China still managed to stop Japan's invasion and showed the Japanese how powerful China was. After that, the two armies continued to face each other, waiting for reinforcements to arrive. Then, there was the battle against the Philippines. Because they were going to fight against Japan, they pulled a lot of their forces over to defend against the Philippines. Because Country F had a lot of people, their combat power was not very strong. China had already built up defenses. Although they had fewer people than Country F, they were able to successfully defend against Country F's invasion. After Country F attacked a few times, they realized that their attacks could not break through, so they could only give up and stay where they were. As for Malaysia, Indonesia, and North Korea, the Chinese side was also on the defensive. because they had pulled almost all of their forces over to deal with Goryeo, Japan, and the Philippines. They could only defend. Even though people from other regions were still arriving, they were not as fast. However, these three countries were not very strong, and their battle wills were quite weak. They had been planning to take advantage of the situation, so after the Chinese side built up defenses, they did not continue to attack. They planned to conquer the border regions that they had conquered. On the eastern side, the situation had calmed down. However, just like in the southern side, both sides were investing more troops. The battles against the other countries were more stable and focused on defense, but the battles against the Japanese and Koreans were much more intense, as they were large-scale battles between people. In the northern side there were 5 countries: Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. These 5 countries weren't very strong, but they weren't very weak either. They could only be said to be average. In history, they were all vassal states of China. As mentioned before, no one wanted to be inferior to others, and no one wanted to submit to others. Now, these 5 countries wanted to prove themselves. They were not only invading China for territory, fate, and other benefits, but also to prove to China that they were not weaker than China and would not submit to China. They wanted China to see their power. However, because of Qin, who they feared the most, they did not dare to be too arrogant. This was especially so for Vietnam, which had lost a region to Qin. As such, they were even more careful than the other countries, as they were afraid that Qin would attack them. The northern side, which had been heavily injured many times, was much weaker than the other sides. However, the battles were not as intense, and they were very stable. After China built up defenses, the 5 countries did not continue to invade. They were mainly worried about Qin. Otherwise, with the northern side's strength, it would have been quite difficult to defend against the 5 countries, and things would not have been so peaceful. This allowed the Chinese factions to let out a sigh of relief. Now that the battles in the northern side were not as intense, they could turn their attention to other battles. This was especially so for the northern side's factions, which had been greatly injured. The most intense battles were still in the western side. The 7 smaller countries were quite easy to defend against because they were not very strong, and their fate was quite weak as well. The main thing was that India's invasion was incredibly terrifying. Shama held a nation armament in one hand and a clan armament in the other, and he looked like a god descending. His body was covered with countless rays of light, and he gave off a heaven-shaking aura. He had gathered 40 million soldiers, 10 million more than before. All of the Indian people's battle intent was incredibly intense. They believed that Shama was the world's god, and they were fighting for him. Even though China had gathered most of the West's combat power and built many sturdy defenses, with various factions pouring in and increasing passion for battle, they were still pushed back by India. By now, India had already invaded 5 regions, and they had already crossed over to China's territory. Chapter 578. After writing a book for so long, let's talk about my personal thoughts. I'm a newbie. When I was in school, my language grades were quite poor, so my writing skills were also quite poor. At first, I didn't understand anything, and I didn't even know how to use words and punctuation. Then, I started writing a book. The first book, My Daily Laughter with the Goddess, could be said to have poured all my emotions into it, but my writing skills were too poor. At first, I had high hopes and thought that the book would be very successful, so I waited for it to be recommended every day and night. Unfortunately, it was proven that my writing was trash. Not only did no one read it, but I was also given the cold shoulder by the editor, who didn't recommend it for a few months. In the end, I reluctantly gave up. It wasn't that the story was bad, it was just that I didn't know anything, so I couldn't write it well. The second book was actually called Those Things Between Me and the Goddess. This book was originally intended to turn all sorts of gods into women, and then push them down. Unfortunately, it was censored, and in the end, I could only change the theme to the strongest. I heard that the word, the strongest, would be popular, so I used the strongest, but in the end it was still trash. With 120,000 words, it only got 2 recommendation votes a day, but it did attract a few rich people. In the end, the third book was The Lord. This book was written with my last hope. If it didn't succeed, then I could only work in a factory like an ordinary person. I didn't expect that although this book wasn't very good, it wasn't that bad either. There were quite a few recommendation votes, so I persevered until now. Some people said that this book could become a god, and I was quite happy, but I also knew how bad my writing was. Also, the results of this book also proved my thoughts. The editor didn't think well of it at the beginning, so he didn't recommend it much. Later on, there was a little more recommendation. With your subscriptions, I finally had food to eat, and I should thank you. When I first started writing this book, because I was influenced by the first 2 books, I avoided writing about emotions, so the characters were rather stiff and slow. Now I slowly improved, and there were also comments. No matter what kind of comments, I would read them seriously. No matter if they were praising me or scolding me, there would be people reading them seriously. At the beginning, I also seriously replied to everyone's comment. But one time, someone said that the writing was very fake. Seeing so many crystals falling from the sky, he still frantically tried to snatch them. My reply was that those items that looked like they were worth tens of millions would belong to whoever snatched them. Even if you didn't snatch them, it didn't mean that others wouldn't. However, his reply was still fake. He said that he didn't want to read it anymore. I didn't reply to any of his comments. I tried my best to explain everything clearly in the book. But now there are some things that I have explained several times in the article, but you did not read them carefully. In the end, you came to me. What do you want me to say? Also, I would like to remind you that the original content has been modified. For example, there are some typos in this chapter. Because the chapters are locked, there is no way to change them, so please understand. Finally, they talked about the storyline. Why did the book keep saying that it was going to collapse? Many people had said that it was going to collapse during the City Lord battle, but had it really collapsed now? Also, let me tell you clearly that this is only the novice area. After this, there is still the beginner area, intermediate area, and advanced area. There are still many large pits that have yet to be dug. Therefore, it was basically impossible for it to collapse. Unknowingly, I've written so many words. Let's stop here. Finally, everyone, please support me. There is also the reader group 5428622279. I welcome everyone to join. I heard that as long as the results are good, the author can agree to wear female clothes. Actually, I can also do it. I don't actually hate it, but hit Big Brother's chest. Don't bully me. Meow meow. Chapter 579. However, after conquering China's 6th region, India temporarily stopped attacking. Right now, India did not dare to go too deep into China's territory, as if they were cut off, they would be doomed without a doubt. Moreover, because of the urgency of the war, the legatees of the Great Han Dynasty in the west, the Great Qing Dynasty in the northwest, and the Great Tang Dynasty in the southwest used advanced border medallions to stop India's unstoppable invasion. Soon, the 3 of them became incredibly famous, and they were warmly welcomed as heroes by countless people. They were loved and respected by tens of thousands of people. The war between India and the Midland continent calmed down, and the war in the west also calmed down. In the end, the war in all 4 sides of China also calmed down, and they had temporarily stopped the invasions. The other countries' ferociousness was dispelled, and the 2 armies built up their defenses. However, China was still unable to take back the border regions for now. Now, there were 2 types of war points. The first was during the first stage of the chaotic world, which was when conquering villages. At the same time, a chaotic world stone steel would appear in every village. The second was during the second stage of the chaotic world, where a chaotic world stone steel would appear in every system main city, and the war points obtained from killing foreigners would be recorded in a person's stats page. Killing a foreigner would normally give 100 war points, and during the fate shift, foreigners would receive 5 times the rewards for killing Chinese people, while China would only receive twice the rewards for defending. From the very beginning, China was at a disadvantage in terms of rewards. War points could be exchanged for all sorts of items, such as city creation hearts, reputation, equipment, and skills. The highest grade items were epic grade, so war points were incredibly valuable. They were no less valuable than the rewards from an event. Ordinary players from foreign countries mainly fought for these rewards, while large families fought for fate and territory. More territory meant more fate, and the more territory a country had, the more powerful it would be. After looking through all of the information, Zhao Fu understood China's current situation. The shift in fate would last for who knew how long, and the war between China and other countries would not end in a short period of time. It would be an ongoing battle. After looking through all of the information, Zhao Fu once again entered the Heaven Awakened world. According to the calendar, it was now the second year of the Heaven Awakened world. Spring had returned, and the ice and snow had melted. Warm sunlight shined on everyone's bodies, warming their hearts. Qin's current situation was like this. The total population had reached 5 million, including 700,000 soldiers. Almost all of the 720,000 soldiers were Stage 1 soldiers, and apart from the 560,000 soldiers that had survived, there were also 100,000 captives and Battle City's soldiers. Gunia had already convinced the old city lord to allow Battle City to join Qin City. The old city lord was a smart person, and after hearing about the results of the battle, he had happily agreed. Anyway, he had already given up the position of the city lord to Gunia, so everything should be handled by Gunia. The only thing he was still worried about was his people. Now that Qin's unification could not be changed, he knew that Qin would treat everyone equally, so he quickly agreed. However, it wasn't that he didn't have any requests. His only wish was to keep the arena. He didn't have more than 10 years left to live, and the arena was his only hobby. Zhao Fu also agreed that the arena could be preserved as one of Battle City's specialties. In actuality, Zhao Fu originally didn't want to preserve the arena, as it expended a lot of his forces. However, after thinking about it, it wasn't too bad either. Qin City needed some bloody and cruel things to nurture its people, and the Qin people were most likely quite capable of fighting. At the same time, Zhao Fu didn't neglect the development of culture. Now that the population had reached 5 million, Rising Qin Academy would not be able to satisfy the demand, so Zhao Fu ordered people to build a few more academies. Martial arts could expand territory, and culture could govern a country. Both were indispensable. Throughout history, Qin's soldiers were incredibly courageous and invincible. However, when it came to governance, they still had some flaws. Zhao Fu didn't just want to create a powerful empire, but he also wanted to create a great empire. Qin only had one goal, which was to unify the 5 regions. If he could unify the 5 regions, Qin's power would become unprecedentedly powerful. Apart from this, there was also the matter of basic cities. Qin City could already level up to a great city, and it already had enough EXP, so it was only lacking a basic city. Another important thing was that Qin City now had things that could harm players. They were void ink and void paper, which Zhao Fu had discovered by accident. When he first saw these 2 items, Zhao Fu didn't pay much attention to them. After all, their descriptions said that they could create special talisman papers, and they were quite expensive, costing 300 New Year points. Because there were so many things that could be exchanged for, Zhao Fu had thought that they would be small items. However, the Golden Dragon had suddenly said that they could create reality-harming talismans. Reality-harming talismans could synchronize damage received in the Heaven-Awakened world into the real world. If one stuck this talisman on a weapon and used it to kill a player, the player in the real world would die. However, this was a relatively low-grade talisman paper, and it was unable to harm people with great fate. This was because the power of indirect damage would be nullified by the person with great fate, so it was unable to harm them. However, it was still quite good to be able to harm ordinary people. Qin would not have to worry about being surrounded and killed by ordinary players. With their undying bodies, they would be able to do as they pleased, and if they faced true death, ordinary people would be terrified. On the fourth night of the New Year festival, Zhao Fu had 2 billion New Year points. He only used 300 million to exchange for general fate, leaving him with 1.7 billion New Year points. Zhao Fu used 3 billion New Year points to exchange for void ink and talisman papers, which could create 30 million reality-harming talismans. This meant that Qin could kill at least 30 million ordinary players. Moreover, these talismans could be stuck on weapons and were not single-use items. They could be used 3 times, and Qin could kill 90 million people. The Golden Dragon also said that he could create talisman weapons, which could increase the effect of the talismans by 4 times. In that case, the number of people Qin could kill would be 360 million. With such a terrifying number, who would dare to make an enemy out of Qin? There were only 7 billion people in the world, and Qin could kill 300 million or so of them. This was enough to kill almost everyone in a large country. If everyone used this talisman weapon equipment, they would be able to end this invasion and cause the other countries to retreat in terror. They would not dare to make an enemy out of Qin. Chapter 580. This was an incredibly exciting matter, and Zhao Fu grinned. Qin no longer had to worry about the threat of ordinary people, and one of his biggest problems had been resolved. Zhao Fu felt much more at ease. But should we deal with this invasion? Qin now has the ability to do so. Zhao Fu thought for a while before sighing. In the end, he decided not to participate. After all, if they fought each other, it would be beneficial to Qin, and he did not have to pay much attention to Qin. This would give Qin an opportunity to secretly develop. If China started to unite against the outside world, Zhao Fu might help China resolve this crisis. However, after destroying Great Qin a few times, Zhao Fu's heart had become cold. However, the war between countries was also a form of internal friction. It was an internal friction between humans. There was an even greater crisis that enveloped the entire human race. Zhao Fu could not care about the world, so he could only take this opportunity to quickly establish a kingdom and ensure that Qin would not be destroyed and that Qin's citizens would not be harmed. With the remaining 500 million New Year points, in order to speed up the process of conquering villages, Zhao Fu exchanged for a village compass, which would point out the locations of villages within 10 kilometers. Even though it was only 10 kilometers, which was not very big, it saved them a lot of time. After all, if they took out the compass and found that there were no villages, they could immediately leave and head to the next region without having to continue searching. This kind of compass was incredibly expensive, and it cost 10 million New Year points to exchange for one. In order to quickly clear out the 5 regions, Zhao Fu could only exchange for 50 of them. With the current military strength, it would take more than a month to clear out a region. If they wanted to clear out the 4 nearby regions, it would take at least half a year. It would take far too much time. Qin's soldiers returned to clearing out the Forest of Horrors, and the 10 or so city lords controlled the situation while the soldiers split up and started to explore. 1 week later, spring had arrived and the snow and ice had all melted. Green sprouts had sprouted on the trees and the ground, and the surroundings were filled with life. By now, Qin had cleared out 2/3 of the Forest of Horrors, and there was only 1/3 left before he could unify the Forest of Horrors. The war at the border of Huaxia was still the same. There weren't many fluctuations. You hit me, then I hit you. The war was in a stalemate. However, Zhao Fu also received a piece of good news, which was that Great Qin had found the final nation legacy in the territory that they had planned out. Northern Qi was the most licentious dynasty in the history of China. The most common thing an emperor did was to rape other people's wives and daughters. Adultery was a common thing. Usually, fathers and sons shared a few women, and brothers shared a few as well. Not only were these women concubines, but they also did not let off their wife. This was not just a once or twice occurrence, rather, it happened quite often. At the same time, the sovereign king also liked to snatch the wives and daughters of his ministers, and he would even do it in court. Some sovereigns even went to court naked. In addition to its debauchery, its politics were also extraordinarily dark and corrupt. Half of the time, Northern Qi was ruled by no law. It was decided by personal likes and dislikes, or by the mood of the day. If they told you to die, you would be sentenced to death. If they told you to live, you would be acquitted. If they didn't kill, they would be sentenced to death, and if they didn't live, they would be innocent. Emperors would also kill people if they wanted to. Some emperors would even dismember the corpses and cook them in court. They would feel uncomfortable if they didn't kill or cook people for a day. It wasn't just a few people a day, but many. In order to satisfy the emperors, the ministers would hand over all of the death criminals to the emperor. Moreover, Northern Qi was extremely extravagant, and they didn't care about the suffering of the commoners. They built palaces and used up countless resources, making the commoners miserable. Northern Qi's two empresses also volunteered to work as prostitutes in brothels. It was important to note that they didn't do it because they did it willingly, and they took pride in it. Many famous people went there, showing just how licentious this dynasty was. There was only one dynasty like this in China, and it was impossible to find another dynasty that was as licentious as this. It was called the most vicious and perverted dynasty in China's history. After Eastern Wei's minister Gao Huan died, his eldest son, Gao Qing, took over, but before he could take over, he was assassinated by a servant. His younger brother, Gao Yang, inherited the throne and quickly deposed Eastern Wei's puppet emperor, Emperor Shaojing, and established Northern Qi. Northern Qi had 6 emperors in total, and it was destroyed by its old enemy, Northern Zhou. It ruled for 28 years. It would be strange if such a dynasty hadn't been destroyed. It had existed for less than 30 years, and it was a short-lived dynasty. However, as a dynasty from the Wei and Jin dynasties, it still had a lot of luck, more than the power of the feudal states. Qin needed luck right now. If he conquered Northern Qi, then Qin's luck would recover, and it could also heal Zhao Fu's injuries. So, Qin had to conquer Northern Qi. After Qin destroyed a few of the legacies, Northern Qi cut off all contact with the outside world and went into hiding. Qin had searched for a while, but he hadn't found anything. However, he still kept an eye on it. This time, he had been quite lucky. When Northern Qi had leveled up to a basic city, the abnormal signs had been discovered by a player who had lost his way, allowing him to find where Northern Qi was. After discovering Northern Qi's location, the player was delirious with joy. After returning, he found Qin and sold this information to Qin for 10,000 gold coins. 10,000 gold coins for a legatee's location was incredibly worth it, and Qin was very happy to trade. Thus, he obtained Northern Qi's location. Northern Qi had also leveled up to a basic city, and it seemed that it was doing quite well. It fulfilled the requirements for Qin to level up to a great city, and if he could conquer it, he would be able to kill many birds with one stone. Zhao Fu was quite delighted. Now, a basic city was nothing to Qin. Even a system main city could be easily taken down by Qin. After all, Qin now had 20 city lords, and this didn't include Zhao Fu. They had 720,000 stage 1 soldiers. Zhao Fu immediately gathered his soldiers and headed to where Northern Qi was. Because it was a legatee, Zhao Fu decided to personally go. However, because his body was quite weak, he needed Xianru to support him. He didn't have to worry about his own safety because Gunia had returned. As Zhao Fu's personal bodyguard, it would be very difficult for anyone to harm Zhao Fu. Chapter 581. Northern Qi was a small city located in a basin, and there was only one exit. It was quite well hidden and would not be easily discovered. Its population was 100,000, and it had 30,000 soldiers and thousands of Stage 1 soldiers. It was one of the most powerful factions in its region. After all, the largest faction had 60,000 to 70,000 people, and having a few hundred people with Stage 1 cultivation was already quite good. It was a pity that it was facing the terrifying Qin. Qin had immediately swept through the villages outside of Northern Qi City and tightly surrounded it. Northern Qi City's people were incredibly panicked. Looking at the powerful auras outside, they could not muster up any will to resist. There are at least 700,000 people outside, and all of them have Stage 1 cultivation. Heavens! How could there be so many Stage 1 soldiers? Just what faction is this? Almost all of Northern Qi City's residents felt insecure, as they knew that they would not be able to stop their invasion. They all looked terrified. Powerful auras shot into the sky, causing the air to freeze. Northern Qi City's residents felt their bodies sink, and they could not stand steadily. There were so many city lords, Northern Qi had fallen. Everyone's faces became ashen, and the situation became even more chaotic. Now it was almost impossible for them to win. Just 20 or so city lords were enough to slaughter all of Northern Qi's people, and they would not be able to resist at all. Surrender! You've already lost, so don't struggle. If you anger His Majesty, I'll kill you all. Bai Qi stood in the air, and his cold and murderous voice sounded throughout all of Northern Qi. Everyone could hear it clearly. A handsome young man dressed in white stood on the city wall surrounded by a group of people. He looked at the 20 figures in the sky with a serious expression. He was extremely shocked and felt a sense of helplessness. Northern Qi's legatee deeply breathed in and said, "Who would have thought that Qin would still have such strength after suffering such heavy losses? All of China's factions are united against the outside world, yet Qin still wants to start a civil war. Isn't he afraid of being mocked and ridiculed by the world?" Northern Qi's legatee saw that they could not resist, so they could only use the righteousness of the world and hope that there was a chance. Bai Qi snorted, "Do you think I, Qin, care about this? Sooner or later, all of you will be killed by Qin. Now I ask you, do you choose to live or die?" Northern Qi's legatee felt quite angry. Hearing Qin's disdainful words, Northern Qi's strength seemed incredibly weak in front of Qin Feng. Now, Qin could bring people from the real world into the Heaven-Awakened world. Even though he could not bring many people, it would be great for dealing with legatees like him. This meant that he really might die. Thinking of death, the Northern Qi successor's heart tightened. Was he supposed to surrender just like that? The heir of Northern Qi was unwilling to accept this, because he also wanted to restore Northern Qi and fulfill his family's long-cherished wish to establish a powerful nation. But reality was already like this. Northern Qi had already lost. Northern Qi only had two choices. Either choose to surrender, or take all of Northern Qi down with you. Zhao Fu stood at the back, looking at Northern Qi's legatee on the city wall, waiting for his decision. It would be best if he could take down one of the legatees without much effort. "Your Highness, not only does she have Dragon Qi, but she also has a massive amount of Phoenix Qi," Xianru said as she smiled beside Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu felt quite startled and looked at Xianru strangely, not understanding how a man could have Phoenix Qi. Xianru couldn't help but lightly laugh. "Your Highness, do you still not understand? She's a woman." Zhao Fu couldn't help but feel quite shocked. Northern Qi's legatee was quite handsome, but he had never thought that he would be a woman. However, Northern Qi's Gao family was quite outstanding in this area. An extremely handsome man had appeared in history, and he was the Prince of Lanling. It was said that he could make countless young women go crazy, and he had to wear a mask every day. Boom! A gray ray of light shot into the sky, causing the sky to tremble. An explosion sounded out as countless traces of gray dragon Qi gathered in the sky, causing the weather to change as a massive might formed. Roar! A massive dragon's roar sounded out in all directions as a 100-meter-long gray dragon condensed in the sky and gave off a powerful aura that spread out like a wild gale. It seemed that she had made her decision, and Bai Qi gave the order to attack and destroy Northern Qi. With Qin's current strength, if they conquered a basic city like this, Qin would at most suffer a few thousand casualties. Great Qin's army gave off a terrifying aura as they flooded towards Northern Level City. The sky was filled with black arrows that gave off sharpness that seemed to be able to kill anything, making it so that no one within Northern Level City dared to reveal themselves. Boom! Colorful City Lord seals floated out of Qin's body and floated above his head. The City Lords then waved their hands, causing the City Lord seals to turn into rays of light and shoot into the sky. Boom! 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 Explosions continuously sounded out as the City Lord seals gave off large amounts of light, forming massive orbs of light that exploded out with terrifying power and gave off shocking auras. The massive orbs of light gave off immense suppressive power, and they combined together and pressed towards the gray dragon. In just one round, the gray dragon had been bound in the sky by 20 orbs of light. No matter how much it struggled, it could not move at all, and it could only furiously roar. Now there was no need for Zhao Fu to act against Northern Qi's legatee. With so many city lords in Qin, they could directly suppress her fate dragon. This was not just a suppression of power but also a suppression of fate. After all, every City Lord seal contained a massive amount of fate. Northern Qi's legatee's expression fell. She had never thought that her most powerful attack would be suppressed so easily. She could only cry out as a square jade seal that gave off a gray light and had a dragon carved on it appeared, and a powerful aura spread out from her body. Seeing that Northern Qi's legatee still wanted to struggle, Zhao Fu said softly, "Leave her alive." As Zhao Fu gave the order, the 10 or so city lords standing in the air immediately obeyed and turned into rays of light as they shot towards Northern Qi's legatee. The battle concluded incredibly quickly. 10 or so system main cities' city lords fighting against a basic city's city lord was just that fast, as they were completely bullying the other party. Seeing that there was no chance of victory, Northern Qi's legatee wanted to commit suicide. However, she was captured and fed a reality fruit, causing her body in the real world to fuse with her body in the Heaven Awakened world. Now that Northern Qi's legatee had been captured, Northern Qi City's battle immediately concluded, and everyone chose to surrender. Chapter 582. After Qin's army took complete control of Northern Qi City, Zhao Fu walked into the city hall with Xianru's support. He sat at the top and looked at the beautiful woman in front of him kneeling on the ground with blood at her lips, looking quite wretched. After capturing Northern Qi's legatee and taking control of the battle, Zhao Fu had wanted to take over Northern Qi City and relocate it. However, Northern Qi's legatee had suddenly changed her mind and said that she was willing to submit to Qin. She expressed that she was willing to do anything and hoped that Qin would be able to preserve Northern Qi's name so that Northern Qi would not be destroyed. Subduing a kingdom was definitely better than destroying a kingdom, as it would continuously provide Qin with fate. Moreover, it would have historical generals to use. Zhao Fu did not even think about it before agreeing. However, Zhao Fu did not give her a sovereign title and instead called her over. Zhao Fu stretched out his hand and lifted her chin. Indeed, she did not have an Adam's apple, she really was a woman. Apart from looking at her Adam's apple, There were other methods. However, Gao Li's chest was quite flat, so he could only check there. However, Zhao Fu had already confirmed that she was a woman, so there was no need to check. Gao Li looked at the pale-faced man in front of her and his blood-red eyes, and she instinctively felt fear. She had long since heard of this person's ferocious reputation, and she worried every day that he would attack. Facing Zhao Fu's frivolous actions, Gao Li's body froze and did not dare to resist. Now, Zhao Fu could do whatever he wanted to her. Not only was her life in his hands, but he also had northern qi in his hands. Gao Li could only obey, and she was afraid of his savagery. Zhao Fu retracted his hand and smiled as he said, "I won't destroy northern qi, but you have to become my concubine." Gao Li wasn't too surprised, because she had long since heard that he was licentious and tyrannical. She softly responded. Zhao Fu looked at Xianru and took the paper from her before summoning the imperial ruler's seal and making Gao Li a concubine. This was the second female legatee that Zhao Fu had seen. Even though Wu Qingyang was the first, given later Zhou's history, Zhao Fu was not too surprised. However, he was quite surprised that Northern Qi had chosen a female legatee. This was because the vast majority of legatees were male, and it was extremely rare for a female legatee to appear. Gao Li's body now contained both Dragon Qi and Phoenix Qi. Because she did not have Wu Qingyang's constitution, once she was made a concubine, her Dragon Qi would be completely converted into Phoenix Qi. The Phoenix Qi of a nation legacy was incredibly powerful. When Zhao Fu's imperial decree paper turned into a ray of light and entered Gao Li's body, boundless gray dragon qi came out of Gao Li's body. A gray dragon started to change within her body. The gray color gradually faded and turned golden. The divine dragon gradually collapsed, and in the end, a brand new golden phoenix appeared. The golden phoenix flapped its wings inside Gao Li's body, and a powerful phoenix qi gushed out like a spring. Zhao Fu's pale face regained some color. Just Gao Li alone had more phoenix qi than Sun Hanxiang and Wei Qin combined. No wonder she was a nation's inheritor. Seeing this, everyone else let out a sigh of relief. To outsiders, Gao Li looked like an incredibly handsome man, and hearing that Zhao Fu was going to make him a concubine, countless people were quite shocked. They thought to themselves, Zhao Fu wasn't interested in women, so why was he interested in men? Looking at Gao Li's Phoenix Qi, everyone realized that this handsome man was actually a woman. Your Highness, we didn't find any historical generals, nor did we find any corpses of historical generals, but we found a few historical figures. A soldier stepped forward and reported. Zhao Fu also had some doubts in his heart. How could there not be any historical generals? Even if they were killed, he should be able to find their corpses. This way, he could bring it back and refine the innate talent blood crystal. Gao Li sighed as she replied, Your Majesty, it's not a big deal. Northern Qi doesn't have any historical generals, but it does have historical beauties. Not a single historical general? Zhao Fu asked. Gao Li nodded. She also felt a little helpless about her family's inheritance of Northern Qi. As expected from China's most liberal dynasty, instead of keeping historical generals, they had kept historical beauties. Normally, a nation's legatee wouldn't do such a thing. Zhao Fu felt quite surprised, but he had expected this. After all, he needed Phoenix Qi, so Zhao Fu ordered, Bring them in. The soldier nodded and brought 6 peerlessly beautiful women into the hall. Not only were they beautiful, but they also had their own unique auras, making them extremely attractive. Northern Qi was quite capable to have collected 6 of these beauties, and they weren't any weaker than the women on the ancient beauty rankings at all. The first was called Lu Lingxian, and she was 26 or 27 years old. Her looks were quite good, and she had snow-white skin and a graceful figure. She gave off a powerful aura, and her gaze was obscure but not lacking in sharpness. She seemed like an ambitious woman, and she was currently secretly looking at Zhao Fu. The second was called Ru Ran, and she looked quite foreign. She was tall and slim, and her skin was the color of wheat. She also gave off a wild and stubborn aura. The third was Chow Jowie, and she was just over 20 years old. She was as beautiful as a flower and had a graceful figure, and she gave off a flirtatious charm. The fourth was Lu Zhaojun, and she was 30 years old. She was quite beautiful and had a mature figure, and she gave off a simple and virtuous aura. The fifth was Li Zhu, and she was extremely beautiful. Her skin was tender, and she gave off a gentle aura. The sixth was Feng Xiaolian, a famous beauty in history. Her beauty was a notch higher than the other five. Not only was her skin tender, but it was also as white as snow. Her figure was graceful, and she gave off a pampered aura. Zhao Fu first had Xianru take a look at them. The phoenix qi around their bodies was quite massive, and it was many times greater than that of a large family's main descendant. Zhao Fu did not hold back and made them concubines. Massive amounts of phoenix qi flowed into the Emperor Phoenix statue, and Zhao Fu immediately felt his injuries quickly recover. Now, he did not need to be supported and could walk for a bit. This was a great improvement. The backlash from the heaven and earth fate was not something that could be healed by ordinary items. After all, medicine was useless, and one could only rely on fate to slowly heal. Following this, Zhao Fu turned his gaze to Feng Xiaolian. Her descendant, Feng Xiu, was still in the Ying family. Facing Zhao Fu's gaze, Feng Xiaolian pouted, a trace of flirtatiousness in her eyes. She looked incredibly alluring, as if she was ready to be plucked. Zhao Fu lightly laughed and ordered people to bring Gao Li and the 6 historical beauties away, and he prepared to conquer northern Qi City. Later, other people found out about what had happened here, and they could not help but sigh. China's most liberal dynasty had been manipulated by others. Chapter 583. Following this, Zhao Fu went to the city hall and stretched out his hand towards the city creation stone and chose to conquer it. The city creation stone continuously trembled and exploded out with a powerful aura, and a gray pillar of light shot into the sky, causing the weather to change. Dong! 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 Heavy and sorrowful drumming sounded out in the sky, and it sounded out 9 times in a row. The massive drumming was so loud that almost the entire northern side of the Midland continent could hear it. Countless people felt quite startled. They knew what this meant, but now that the two armies were at a stalemate and China and the other countries were fighting intensely, who could destroy a dynasty legacy? Everyone was shocked. Everyone knew that the dynasty legacy had been destroyed. Apart from Qin, who had been heavily injured and had not been heard from at all, there was no one else in the northern side of the Midland continent. Hearing this, the 5 invading countries in the northern side felt quite terrified, and they immediately went into a defensive state and did not attack for now. This matter was quickly heard by the other dynasty legatees, and they coldly laughed and sent people to spread rumors. Soon, countless people found out that Great Qin had actually started an internal war and destroyed a dynasty legacy despite being united against the outside world. The Chinese side was sent into an uproar as tens of thousands of people started to curse at Qin. God damn it! Are you even a Chinese person? Not only is he hiding like a coward and not doing anything, but he's also starting an internal war and destroying unity. Goddammit, are you even human, Qin? Qin's an idiot. Get the hell out of China. How disgusting. He's definitely a traitor, or else he wouldn't have destroyed the war. Everyone, remember, we'll find an opportunity in the future to destroy that dog Qin. He's destroying unity and going against the will of the people. China is in a crisis, yet he's not doing anything. It's best if this trash dynasty is destroyed as soon as possible. That Emperor Qin is the same. China doesn't need such a selfish person who doesn't care about love at all. Everyone in China cursed, but after hearing about this, the various countries looked quite shocked. Hadn't Qin's fate been used up? Emperor Qin should have suffered a backlash from the heaven and earth fate, and he should be resting in his base. Why had he come out again? It hadn't even been that long. Could it be that Qin had recovered so quickly? Don't tell me he's going to do something big again. The various countries hesitated for a moment before finally entering a defensive state and not attacking. They wanted to see if there were any changes to the situation. India's Shama's expression became quite serious. Now that he had a nation armament and clan armament, it could be said that he looked down on everyone and believed that no one could defeat him. The only person he feared was Qin's legatee, the person he feared the most in the world. Facing him, Shama did not have much confidence because the other party also had a clan armament and had many other terrifying methods. If they fought, there was at least a 50% chance that they would lose. After pondering for a moment, Sarah decided not to attack for now. She decided to wait and see if there were any changes to the situation. His gaze returned to Zhaofu. After conquering Northern Level City, a series of notifications rang out in his mind, making Zhaofu's head feel like it was about to explode. Notification: Northern Qi's surrender was devoured by Qin, and Qin obtained a great deal of it. Notification: Qin subdued Northern Qi and obtained all of its inheritances. Notification: Qin's city heart has evolved and is currently 4/30th. System announcement: Qin City has obtained 1/5 of Northern Level City's stat. System announcement: Nation Armament 12 Metal Colossi has obtained a large amount of Nation Fate and Evolve. System announcement: Clan Armament Imperial Ruler's Seal has obtained a large amount of Nation Fate and Evolve. System announcement: You have conquered a city with a nation legacy and obtained 6,000 achievement points. System announcement: You have obtained 500 war points. System announcement: Congratulations, Qin City has fulfilled the final condition and obtained sufficient EXP. It has begun to level up into a level 1 great city. Zhao Fu did not look at the other system announcements, but when he saw the final system announcement, Zhao Fu couldn't help but smile. Qin City had finally leveled up into a great city. At the same time, as a large amount of Northern Qi's fate was absorbed by Qin City's withered body recovered some of its energy, and Zhao Fu's injuries also recovered. Now, he did not need to be supported and could walk without any problems. After taking care of everything, Zhao Fu felt quite satisfied as he returned to Qin City. Because Northern Qi City's foundations had not been destroyed, it could not be relocated, and Zhao Fu did not take the people here with him. Northern Qi City's population was now only 70,000, which was relatively small compared to a normal city. In response, Zhao Fu provided some high-tier medicinal pills and some high-quality equipment for them to defend the city. Zhao Fu also left some in the villages outside so that Northern Qi could recover faster. Right now, Northern Qi belonged to Qin City, so with Qin City's protection, it would be relatively safe. However, its own strength was still needed. However, Gaoli still had 6 historical figures that Zhao Fu had to take with him. Although Gaoli was Northern Qi's legatee, she had already been made a concubine, so Zhao Fu had to take Northern Qi City with her. Northern Qi City would be given to someone she trusted to manage, and the city lord's seal would remain in Gaoli's hands. Zhao Fu would also place some people in Northern Qi City to control it, and he allowed Gaoli to come and take a look every once in a while. Gaoli expressed her gratitude towards Zhao Fu's arrangements and was willing to leave with Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu had not expected that Gaoli would be quite suitable for the Silver Lake Immortal Sword, so he gave it to her so that she could stay by his side and be trained as a guard. After returning to Qin City, Zhao Fu immediately looked at Qin City's stats. Village name: Qin City, Epic Level. Level 1 Great City Village Area. 4,500 square kilometers village territory. 201,800 square kilometers popular support. 85 special stats. Territory crop output plus 150%, territory crop growth time minus 150%, population limit plus 105%, residence stats plus 10, soldiers stats plus 11%, population attraction plus 125%, high-grade attraction plus 125%. Subsidiary village limit. 8. 400 subordinate villages. Logue Village, Jean Village, Doran Village, Lee Family Village, Wolf Village, Tiger Village. After upgrading a great city to level 1, it would require more than 10 million experience points. This was a massive figure, and a normal person might not be able to gather so much in their entire life. This was not an easy task for Qin City either. However, after upgrading a great city to level 5, it would be a capital city, and above that would be a royal city. With a royal city, Qin City would be able to establish a nation. This was something that everyone would be excited about. The requirements for upgrading a capital city were 3 great cities, 6 small cities, and 9 towns. Chapter 584. Now Qin had 2 main tasks. The first was for Qin's soldiers to continue clearing out the remaining 1/3 of the Forest of Horrors before unifying the Forest of Horrors and clearing out the other regions. The second was to create reality-harming talismans. Even though Qin had the materials and the method to create them, he was still unable to create them. This was because Qin still lacked a profession, which was a talisman master. A talisman master's main purpose was to create all sorts of talisman papers. Qin didn't use talisman papers much and only bought them during events, so he didn't nurture any talisman masters. Qin had only nurtured 2 of these professions: equipment masters who could create equipment and alchemists who could refine medicinal pills. Because he needed these professions the most, he had nurtured a large number of them. However, talisman masters also needed to be nurtured. Apart from creating talisman papers, Zhao Fu also wanted to create talisman weapons, which were also called talisman equipment. Talisman equipment required talisman stones because talisman stones were a core material. The method to create them was quite complicated and required a talisman master to participate. According to the Golden Dragon, talisman equipment was something that the Heaven Murder Empire had obtained after destroying an extremely powerful talisman empire. It was an incredibly powerful piece of equipment, and it was a secret of the talisman empire. White-grade talisman weapons were even more powerful than blue-grade weapons, and they could be used with talisman papers to create powerful enchantments that were even more powerful than silver-grade weapons. It was a pity that Qin lacked the core material, talisman stones. Talisman stones were quite rare, and most of the talisman stones on the market were white grade. They were incredibly expensive, costing 1 gold coin each. However, what Qin didn't lack the least was money. Putting aside the player's equipment, just the 10 or so system main cities that Qin had destroyed could provide him with at least 3 million gold coins, which was 30 million gold coins in total. Zhao Fu ordered people to buy a large number of talisman stones from the market. Of course, the higher the grade, the more powerful the talisman weapons would be. Apart from this, Zhao Fu also spent a large amount of money to buy 10 talisman master profession change stone steels. Each stone steel could allow 2,000 talisman masters to change professions, which was 20,000 in total. It was best for talisman masters to be literate. If they knew calligraphy, they would be more suitable for talisman masters because talisman masters were good at writing. Talisman masters needed to be nurtured, and talisman weapons and talismans could not be produced in a short period of time. Zhao Fu placed his attention on other matters. Zhao Fu called over Sun Hanxiang and the other 3 women. Because there were many things to do, Zhao Fu hadn't paid much attention to them recently, and he didn't have them serve him in bed. Now, the 4 women's loyalty had increased, and Bai Shihan's loyalty was now 80%, and she could be appointed as a general. However, the other three women's loyalty wasn't very high. Sun Hanxiang only had 40 loyalty, Wei Qing only had 30 loyalty, and Su Liuyi only had 50 loyalty. Zhao Fu felt quite disappointed and did not know when he would be able to tame them, so he said, "You can leave for now." Of course, he said this to Sun Hanxiang and the other two women. As for Bai Shihan, she stayed by Zhao Fu's side. She was a general, and as long as she was willing to submit, she would be on equal footing with the other generals. However, at that moment, Wei Qing suddenly said, "I don't want to stay with your women, I want to go to the battlefield." The three of them were all generals and had experienced many battles. They simply couldn't accept this, and they didn't want to be like other women. They were Zhao Fu's concubines, and they had had enough of this. Zhao Fu couldn't help but laugh as he said, "Do you really think that with your loyalty, I'll be able to hand my soldiers over to you?" Hearing this, Wei Qing was speechless. Sun Hanxiang bowed and sighed as she said, "I'm willing to submit. Anyways, I've already been in bed with your majesty for a few days, and I can't protect my reputation anymore. I admit defeat." Hearing this, a trace of awkwardness appeared on Zhao Fu's face. Seeing this, Su Liuyi also made a decision. Her loyalty had reached 50, which was 10 points higher than Sun Hanxiang's, so she also said, "I'm also willing to serve Qin." In the end, Wei Qing, one of the three genius cavalry generals of the Western Han dynasty, still hesitated. Perhaps it was because of the relationship between Qin and the Han dynasty, but in the end, she took a step back and promised to be loyal to Qin. Seeing that the three women's loyalty had reached 70, Zhao Fu couldn't help but smile. At first, he didn't know how long it would take to tame them, and he had never thought that things would change so quickly. Even though 70 loyalty was not very high, it could be used for a while. In the future, their loyalty would most likely increase. After appointing the four women, they completely calmed down and no longer opposed Zhao Fu. They smiled and could now lead soldiers. "Your Majesty, they're all generals?" After the four women left, Gao Li asked in shock. She could sense that the auras the four women gave off were different from ordinary people, and they were quite different from other women. Countless people wanted to know about the 10 great generals during the New Year period, and they clearly remembered information about these generals. Zhao Fu nodded. Now that Gao Li belonged to Qin, Zhao Fu did not hide anything and told her everything. This caused Gao Li to feel incredibly shocked, and she thought to herself, "Qin is indeed monster level. He gets at least half of the benefits in this event. No wonder no one can defeat him." Now, it was not important, she belonged to this man. The more powerful Qin was, the more powerful she would be, and the more benefits her family would receive. Thinking about this, a trace of gentleness appeared in Gao Li's eyes, and she seemed to be willing to become Zhao Fu's woman. After subduing the four women, Qin had 4 more generals. Their general stars were all generals, but because they had been summoned to this world, they were like the other historical generals and had fate seals. However, after resolving this matter, Zhao Fu had one less thing to worry about. Finally, Zhao Fu went to the Wyvern Den to take a look. The wyverns were one of Qin's great hidden weapons, and they had the power to turn the tide of battle. It was a pity that there were only 32 wyverns. There were 27 wyverns that could directly participate in battle. Those that could directly participate in battle were all wyverns that had just been born, which was to say, all wyverns other than larvae. Larvae were wyverns that had just been born, and the other wyverns in their growth, maturity, and old age could all be used in battle. Time gradually passed, and the various kingdoms did not sense any movements from Qin, so they slightly relaxed. As more and more soldiers were sent into battle, the battle became more and more intense. Chapter 585. Another week later, Great Qin finally finished clearing out the Forest of Horrors. There were basically no obstructions, and ordinary villages could not resist at all. The only towns that could resist were the towns, but facing Great Qin's monstrous strength, they were easily destroyed. At the same time, after clearing out all of the factions in a region, Qin's strength once again rose to a terrifying level. Zhao Fu's population had reached 6.5 million, and Zhao Fu had 1.2 million soldiers. 800,000 of these soldiers were already Stage 1 soldiers, and 400,000 new members had all taken blood god pills to increase their cultivations. With the help of Stage 3 medicinal pills, they would soon reach Stage 1. There were now 10,000 Stage 2 soldiers, and they were all veterans. These Stage 2 soldiers could easily kill Stage 1 soldiers in a few moves, and each person could easily deal with 7 or 8 of them. If he had 20,000 Stage 2 soldiers, they would be able to deal with at least 140,000 Stage 1 soldiers, which was already quite powerful. If he could nurture Stage 3 soldiers, each of them would be able to deal with 50 Stage 1 soldiers. This was a world where high-stage soldiers ruled, and they were the main force in conquering worlds. Low-stage soldiers could only be slaughtered, so Zhao Fu had long since wanted to nurture high-stage soldiers. It was a pity that despite Zhao Fu doing his best, he was still too slow. Most of the soldiers had Stage 9 cultivation, while Qin did not even have Stage 1 soldiers yet. Zhao Fu could only take things slowly, and Qin had already nurtured 21,000 Stage 1 soldiers. He definitely had Stage 3 soldiers as well. Apart from population and soldiers, Qin now had 19 great cities, 3 cities, 12 towns, and 1,389 villages. These were all Great Qin's foundations, and the number of people they spawned was incredibly shocking. A great city spawned at least 500 people per day, a basic city spawned at least 200 people per day, a town spawned at least 100 people per day, and a village spawned at least 5 people per day. The 19 great cities spawned 9,500 people per day, the 3 cities spawned 600 people per day, the 12 towns spawned 1,200 people per day, and the 1,389 villages spawned 6,945 people per day. Altogether, there were 18,245 people per day, or nearly 20,000 people per day, which was how many people Qin spawned in a single day. Apart from this, Great Qin had also purchased at least 25,000 people from the slave system in the various regions. Moreover, this was the number of people that Great Qin had bought in a single day. Only with the support of a huge population could they continuously make up for the population consumption caused by war in the future. This way, the country would not be empty and unable to defend against invasions. Now, the Forest of Horrors had become Qin's base, and they had cleared out all of the region's factions. They had completely taken control of the Forest of Horrors, and this was Qin's first cornerstone, as well as the first step for Qin to dominate. In the future, it would be the capital of Qin. After clearing out all the forces, Zhao Fu obtained the final control of this area and also received a notification. Notification: you have destroyed all of the Forest of Horrors factions and obtained the highest authority in this region. You are now the lord of this region and can change the laws of this region. After this system announcement sounded out, the entire Forest of Horrors trembled. Rays of 3-colored light continuously appeared in the surroundings and gathered above the Great Qin city. A massive aura spread out from the sky. This aura had no ill intent and only gave off pure power, causing countless people to look up and revere it. At the same time, a 2-meter-wide 3-colored ball of light appeared in the sky. Then, it slowly descended and automatically merged with Qin's city heart. Notification: Qin City has fused with the region heart, and Qin's faction has become the official faction of this region. This was quite a delightful matter. Just from hearing about the highest authority in a region, one could tell how powerful Qin's faction was. Moreover, Qin's faction had become the official faction of this region, which meant that Qin was now the official faction of this region. Zhao Fu couldn't help but feel excited and loudly laugh. Now that Qin had become the official faction of the Forest of Horrors, its power was incredibly great. At the same time, there were countless unexpected benefits. This would make anyone incredibly happy, and they would laugh so hard that they wouldn't be able to close their mouth. After all, the benefits and power far surpassed anything that anyone could imagine. Now, Qin City had a new page, which was the region page. Now, everything in the Forest of Horrors was under Qin's control. First, he could change the name of the region. Even though the name Forest of Horrors suited the appearance of this place, Zhao Fu didn't like it. After all, this was Qin's base, and calling it the Forest of Horrors didn't sound good. Zhao Fu thought about it and decided to use the name of the ancient capital of Qin, which was Xianying. He entered the name Xianying into the region page and chose to confirm. Immediately, a wave of light spread out from Qin City, and everyone in the Forest of Horrors received a system announcement that the Forest of Horrors had disappeared, and there was only the Xianying region. Next, it was time to choose whether or not to set up a void zone. The void zone at the edge of a region could be set up by Qin City, and it wasn't controlled by the system anymore. Even if the system removed all of the void zones in the future, the Xianying region's void zone wouldn't disappear because it was controlled by Qin City. As such, whether or not it was removed was up to Qin City. Qin City definitely had to set up this void zone, and he had to set up an advanced forbidden power. Advanced forbidden power meant that even with the void crystal, one wouldn't be able to use it. After all, the void crystal could only break through the elementary forbidden power, so Zhao Fu set it to advanced forbidden power. Some people might want to ask if even the void crystal was useless, wouldn't Qin City be unable to leave? In actuality, Qin City didn't even need the void crystal to teleport. After all, Qin City was the official of the Xianying region, and the region heart was fused with Qin City. As such, the teleportation channel that Qin City had set up had the region's attributes, so people could teleport freely. Zhao Fu also tried to see if he could break through the advanced forbidden power, but he found that it didn't have any effect. As for the method to destroy isolation barriers, Great Qin had already grasped it. In actuality, they just needed a restriction-breaking stone, which was used to destroy isolation barriers and restrictions. After all, it was quite rare to find such a stone. However, this kind of restriction-breaking stone was also divided into elementary, intermediate, and advanced grades. Most of them were elementary restriction-breaking stones, which could break through elementary isolation arrays. Before, Qin City had used an elementary isolation formation, but because the area he had set up was quite large, there were only 1 or 2 intermediate and advanced isolation formations, and they weren't able to create a large-scale barrier. As such, he could only choose an elementary isolation formation, which was why it was easily broken through. Chapter 586. However, even with an advanced restriction-breaking stone, it would not be able to break through the region's isolation zone. This was because the two types of power were completely different. The isolation zone was made up of the region's power, and it was quite difficult for the restriction-breaking stone to break through it. It was a pity that the isolation zone was only 5,000 kilometers wide. Zhao Fu wanted to make it wider so that anyone who wanted to enter Xianying City would have to walk. The wider the isolation zone, the more time it would take, and it would allow for more ambushes. However, this was already quite good. Even the fastest person would need 2 or 3 days to travel 5,000 kilometers, which was enough. Qin could also set up a simple warning zone so that if someone invaded, Qin would be able to react in time. As the official of a region, Qin would receive a 10% bonus to its base stats, and invaders would receive a 10% bonus to their stat. Apart from battle stats, as the official faction of Xianying City, Qin's production stats would also receive a 30% bonus to its territory's crop production, and growth time would be minus 30%. Moreover, it would receive a special profession, Region Guard. Region Guard. D-grade military description. Soldiers of a region's official faction, effect, receives, region's power. After Qin's grade and profession upgrade stone, Qin's soldiers had reached D grade, which was even higher than the region guard. The region guard's grade was the same as the village's special professions. However, the region guard's power would receive bonuses in the region it ruled, and its effects might exceed Qin's grade. However, if it went to other regions, it would not have this effect, so Zhao Fu felt that he could change professions to Xianyang City's guards. Apart from professions, Zhao Fu could also give official positions, which would receive a certain amount of the region's fate and some blessings. These official positions were like town lords, which were different from becoming a town lord himself. One was in the wilderness while the other was an official faction. As long as one obtained an official position, they would become an official faction of the region, and they would receive some bonus stats. Because Qin was a nation faction, the town lords and town lords that Zhao Fu had appointed before did not need to be appointed again, and they could directly become an official faction of the region. After that, Zhao Fu could also issue region notifications and region quests. As long as you were in Xianyang, no matter where you were, once Qin issued a prompt, everyone would receive it. This was no different from the previous system prompt. As for the region quests, they were the same as the city quests. The only difference was that you didn't need to go to the quest stone stele to receive them. No matter where you were or how far away you were, as long as you were in the region, you could accept the quest and receive the rewards. This was equivalent to obtaining a portion of the system's authority. Just how powerful was this ability? It was enough to make countless people excited. There was also some authority, and needless to say, this was the benefit of unifying a region. Now that Qin had completely controlled Xianyang in his hands, the first cornerstone of hegemony was laid. Next, Zhao Fu looked at the 4 regions around Xianyang. Red Plum Plain, East Green, Little Valley, 100 Bamboo. These 4 regions didn't have any system factions, and after the last battle, some system main cities had been relocated by Qin. The remaining system main cities knew that Qin wouldn't let them off. After personally witnessing Qin's strength, they knew that they wouldn't be able to stop him. As such, they could only choose to relocate, taking their city creation stones and countless residents to other regions. Out of the 4 regions, Zhao Fu planned to first clear out Red Plum Plain because it was flat and had a good field of vision, making it easier for Qin to clear out all of the factions. Moreover, the plains here were very suitable for raising horses, so Zhao Fu wanted to turn this place into a horse farm. In the future, all of the war horses of the Qin Empire would come from here. Cavalry was the most powerful type of soldier in ancient times, so there had to be a lot of them. However, Zhao Fu hadn't started to clear out Red Plum Plain yet. Instead, he split his 1.2 million soldiers into 4 teams and sent them into the 4 regions before setting up camp where the system main cities had been. System announcement. East Green's system faction has retreated. You have conquered East Green's region and obtained the region's fate. Players will no longer spawn in that region. System announcement. Red Plum Plains system faction has retreated. You have conquered Red Plum Plains region and obtained the region's fate. Players will no longer spawn in that region. System announcement. 100 Bamboos system faction has retreated. You have conquered 100 Bamboos region and obtained the region's fate. Players will no longer spawn in that region. System announcement. Little Valley's system faction has retreated. You have conquered Little Valley's region and obtained the region's fate. Players will no longer spawn in that region. Apart from the 4 system announcements that they had conquered a region, Zhao Fu also received 4 system announcements that they had obtained region treasure chests, causing Zhao Fu to smile. Zhao Fu wanted to first conquer the 4 regions before slowly clearing them out. This would prevent others from taking advantage of the situation, and it was for the sake of the 4 regions' fate. With this fate, Qin recovered a lot of his strength, and Zhao Fu's injuries were once again healed. Now, he could use some of his strength. At first, Zhao Fu hadn't thought about this. However, the four regions had long since fallen into Qin's hands, so he hadn't paid too much attention. Only after unifying the Forest of Horrors did his thoughts become clear. The sudden system announcement that four regions had been conquered caused the entire Midland continent to tremble. The system announcements that they had received were different from what Zhao Fu had received. System announcement: East Green's region has been conquered. System announcement: 100 Bamboos region has been conquered. System announcement: Red Plum Plains region has been conquered. These continuous system announcements caused countless people to be speechless. How could someone conquer four regions in a row? This was simply impossible. At first, the ordinary people could not react because four border regions had been conquered in a row. Their faces turned pale, and only after a while did they realize that it was not a border region but a region within China. However, conquering four regions at the same time was simply too shocking. Even the powerful India, with 40 million people, would have to conquer regions one by one. Conquering four regions at once had never happened before. Countless legatees' expressions fell. Because of Qin, they clearly remembered the names of the four regions, and they knew who had done it. Apart from Qin, who else could it be? Qin recovered so quickly? Is he showing off his fangs to them? The announcement that he had conquered four regions at the same time was undoubtedly an announcement. You bunch of trash, I've stood up again. Chapter 587. Zhao Fu did not know about the various kingdoms, and looking at the four treasure chests in his hands, he smiled. These were region treasure chests, and the things that could be opened were not simple at all. The Truth Tree and Seraph Heart were both from here. He first opened the first treasure chest, and light flowed out as a stone appeared. It was as big as a fist and was square. It was silver and gave off a faint silver light. Strengthening Spatial Stone, a stone that has massive spatial attribute. It can be used on teleportation channels or weapons, and it has extremely powerful spatial energy. Looking at this stone, a smile appeared on Zhao Fu's face. With this item, as long as he waited for the Chaotic World Stone Steel to level up to level 6, Zhao Fu would be able to use all of his war points to exchange for a certain item. That way, the Heavenly Domain Stone, World Iron, and Strengthening Spatial Stone would all be useful, and he would be able to create something that Zhao Fu had been waiting for. That item was incredibly important to Qin, and it could allow Qin to take the lead in the entire world and obtain a massive advantage. He would most likely be able to see this item soon, as the Chaotic World Stone Steel was about to level up. After clearing out Red Plum Plains, he would be able to obtain it. The first item was quite good, and Zhao Fu looked at the second item expectantly. It was a very large ballista that was 5 meters wide and 9 meters long. Its structure was quite complicated, and ordinary people would not be able to understand it. However, it gave off an incredibly savage aura and was definitely not an ordinary item. Dragon-slaying ballista. A ballista specifically used to shoot dragons. It has extremely destructive power and can kill all dragons below stage 7. The user's cultivation must be at least stage 4. It was actually used to shoot dragons. With how powerful dragons were, if this thing could directly kill them, it would be enough to show how powerful the dragon-slaying ballista was. Being able to directly kill dragons below stage 7 was quite shocking. Now that Qin had a stage 5 wyvern, its massive aura caused countless people to feel incredibly shocked. With the advantage of the air, even 50,000 stage 1 soldiers would not be able to subdue a single wyvern. On the other hand, this ballista could kill dragons below rank 7. Just thinking about it showed how powerful it was. Since it could kill dragons below rank 7, it could at least heavily injure dragons below rank 7. Its power was simply too shocking. Looking at the massive ballista that gave off a faint light and its complex structure, It was impossible for Qin to create something like this. Just the materials used to construct the ballista were already epic-grade materials. Currently, Qin was still incapable of forging epic equipment. How could he possibly produce such a powerful ballista? The second item was another delightful item, and the anticipation in Zhao Fu's eyes became even stronger as he opened the third item. Light shot out from the treasure chest as a piece of metal appeared. It was as big as an egg and was oval-shaped. It was golden and gave off a brilliant golden light and a sharp aura. Innate variant metal, an extreme epic-grade material that has the sharpness of innate metals. It is the most suitable material for forging weapons. Seeing that it was only a single material, Zhao Fu was somewhat disappointed. However, an extreme-grade epic material was already quite good, so Zhao Fu wasn't too disappointed. Now it was time for the final treasure chest. Zhao Fu wondered what kind of good things it would contain. After Zhao Fu lightly opened it, a medicinal pill appeared in front of him. The medicinal pill was red, black, and yellow, and it gave off a herbal smell. Zhao Fu wasn't sure what kind of medicinal pill it was. Domain pill. After consuming, it can awaken one's own domain. If one already has a domain, consuming this pill can strengthen it. Looking at this medicinal pill, Zhao Fu felt that it was quite good. Now that Zhao Fu had a king's domain, this domain pill could cause his king's domain to once again evolve. Now that he had opened all 4 of the region treasure chests, Zhao Fu was quite satisfied. As expected from something that came from region treasure chests. After returning to his room, Zhao Fu sat cross-legged on his bed and consumed the domain pill. His body trembled as the domain pill turned into 3 streams of energy that flowed through his body and gathered in his mind. Boom! Zhao Fu felt as if his mind had exploded as a black, semicircular barrier of light uncontrollably spread out. It was 300 meters wide, and the 9 dragon inscriptions on the black barrier increased to 36, swimming around it. Zhao Fu's king's domain gave off a powerful aura of suppression, as if it was a dragon's might. It was 4 times as powerful as before, and it gave him even more power and defense. Everyone looked at the massive barrier of dragon inscriptions and felt quite startled. They didn't understand what was going on, and they all worriedly rushed over to Zhao Fu. By then, Zhao Fu had already put away his king's domain, and he received a system announcement. System announcement. Congratulations, you have unlocked perception, one of the 5 celestial senses. Zhao Fu couldn't help but feel delighted. He had never thought that he would be able to unlock the 3rd of the 5 celestial senses like this. Before, Zhao Fu had already unlocked heaven's sense and divine's sense, and now, he had unlocked perception as well. Now that he had unlocked 3 of the 5 celestial senses, he only had 2 left before he could unlock the legendary celestial mode. Your Majesty, are you all right? Xianru's voice sounded out from outside. Zhao Fu nodded and let her in. Seeing that Zhao Fu was fine, everyone let out a sigh of relief. Now that Zhao Fu had received the backlash from the heaven and earth fate, he couldn't allow anything to happen to him. Elsewhere, Qin's soldiers, who had completed their missions in the 4 regions, started to return, while spies from the other countries stealthily infiltrated the 4 regions. At first, when the spies received their orders, they felt quite nervous because they felt that something big had happened in the 4 regions. If they weren't careful, they might be caught by Qin, and it would be best for them to commit suicide. Otherwise, they would be skinned alive by Qin and suffer a fate worse than death. Everyone was incredibly clear about Qin's brutality, but after spending a few days in the 4 regions, they found that nothing had happened, and they all reported back. After hearing about this, countless factions let out a sigh of relief. The 2 sides, who had entered a truce, once again started to fight intensely. What supported this war was massive profits, and it was impossible for the 2 sides to stop so easily. Zhao Fu spent the next few days quite leisurely. Because he didn't have much to do, he rode on Little Black, took Little Gray and Little White, and walked around Qin's territory. Little Black, Little Gray, and Little White suddenly felt that these names were quite childish, and they suited their powerful appearances. As such, Zhao Fu renamed them Little Black to Black Forest, Little Gray to Moonwolf, and Little White to Fat Cat. Little Black had the underworld nightmare bloodline, so it was incredibly fast, and its hooves were accompanied by green flames. Little Gray's body was now snow white, and it didn't have gray fur like before. It also had a pair of silver eyes, as if it had the Howling Moon bloodline. Not only did its movements become much more elegant, but its appearance also became more handsome and dignified. Chapter 588. Before, Little White was quite dissatisfied with this name, and it acted as if it didn't want to talk to Zhao Fu anymore. However, when Zhao Fu agreed to take it out to play, it jumped onto Zhao Fu's body and quickly accepted this name. Now, the three of them were all Lord-class creatures and were quite powerful. Because Zhao Fu had been nurturing them this entire time, with the heaven and earth refining formation, they could obtain many things to advance. Zhao Fu rode on Black Forest and slowly walked through the forest with Moonwolf by his side, and Fat Cat comfortably perched on Zhao Fu's shoulder. There was also a wyvern flying in the sky. It was the wyvern that Zhao Fu had hatched. After a few months of feeding, and with the effects of the raising stone, the wyvern's body was much larger than before. Its wings were now 5 meters wide, and it gave off a powerful dragon's might. It was now a lord-class creature, and Zhao Fu had named it Dragon Spirit. By now, all of Xianyang City belonged to Qin City, and Zhao Fu was quite pleased with this. Qin City's path to restoring its kingdom wasn't far off. After playing around for a day, the sun set over the western mountains, dyeing half the sky golden. It looked quite beautiful. When they returned to Qin City, Xianru was already waiting for them. When she saw Zhao Fu return, she smiled and bowed as she said, "Your Majesty." Zhao Fu softly nodded and got off his horse before asking, "How's the progress?" Xianru replied, "Everything is going quite smoothly. We've already started creating reality-harming talismans, and we're preparing talisman weapons." Over the past few days, Zhao Fu had changed professions to 20,000 talisman masters. At the same time, they continuously practiced drawing talismans, and in order to quickly grasp the profession of talisman master, Zhao Fu had hired over 100 talisman masters with high salaries. These talisman masters were all intermediate talisman masters, and while it was said that they had been hired with high salaries, Zhao Fu had actually used the benefits to convince them to join Qin City. However, although there were many intermediate symbol masters, not a single advanced symbol master was willing to come. However, Zhao Fu did not expect that there would be an advanced symbol master in his own city. Zhao Fu had conquered many system main cities and subdued many indigenous residents, and this advanced talisman master was one of them. He was called Shi Qianhua, and he was an elder who looked to be in his 50s. He had a rather fiery temper, but in front of Zhao Fu, he was a meek old man. Making charms would become a very important production in Qin City. Zhao Fu also set up a special department to manage it. Because Shi Qianhua knew this better, Zhao Fu asked him to manage it. With the addition of Shi Qianhua and hundreds of intermediate talisman masters, those who had just advanced professions quickly learned. After a few days of hard work and sharing their experiences with others, they also successfully entered the realm of elementary talisman masters and started to create true harm talismans. These true harm talismans were one of Qin City's trump cards, and they were specially used to deal with ordinary people. It was best to obtain them as soon as possible to avoid any unexpected event. 3 days later, regardless of the battles outside, Qin City silently stayed where it was and did not make any big movements. Qin City's soldiers continued to clear out the Red Plum Plains. In China's battle, the southern side's battle was quite ordinary. Even though the eastern side's battle was quite intense, China was not weak at all. The northern side's battle was as calm as a lake, and the southern side's battle was the most dangerous. India was definitely China's greatest enemy, and the Chinese side had always been at a disadvantage. If China directly fought with India, India would definitely lose. However, things were different now. China not only had to fight with India but 21 other countries. All of the other countries had their own forces, so they could not focus on India. Now, India had gathered 10 million or so people and started to invade from another region. The Chinese side had also urgently gathered people to defend. Your Majesty, the talisman equipment has been successfully forged. An elderly man said delightedly as he held a newly forged weapon and came before Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu was currently sitting on a bamboo chair next to a small stream, leisurely fishing. Hearing Shi Qianhua's words, Zhao Fu smiled and took the sword Shi Qianhua handed over. This sword was slightly green because it was made of bronze essence. It was 1 meter long and there was a row of runes on the spine of the sword, which Zhao Fu could not understand. There was a talisman stone at the joint of the hilt and blade, and the sword gave off a mysterious and obscure feeling. Zhao Fu gripped the sword and tried to send his cultivation power into it. The sword buzzed and the row of runes on the spine of the sword gave off a faint white light. The two sides of the sword gave off a sharp sword light, and the cold and sharp feeling caused people's hairs to stand on end. This sword also became extraordinary. It was like a peerless sword, and it gave off an incredibly sharp aura that could make people shiver in fear. Xing! Zhao Fu casually slashed out, and a white sword arc flashed. A tree that was as thick as a person's thigh fell to the ground, and the cut was as smooth as a mirror. Seeing this, Zhao Fu felt quite shocked. This was much sharper than ordinary silver-grade weapons. Seeing how shocked Zhao Fu was, Shi Qianhua gave a pleased smile and said, "Your Majesty, this talisman equipment can also be used with talisman papers. This talisman equipment can also be used with talisman papers." Zhao Fu nodded and took a small fireball talisman and stuck it on the sword. He once again sent his cultivation power into it, and a row of runes lit up. The talisman paper on the sword started to burn, and its fire attribute power fused into the sword. The sword light that the blade gave off became a fiery color, and Zhao Fu casually slashed out, causing a fiery sword qi to slash out. This talisman equipment was incredibly powerful, and if Qin could fully equip it, his battle power would increase by many times. Zhao Fu felt quite excited. This equipment was made from blue-grade materials and white-grade talisman stones, and its power was not any weaker than an exquisite silver-grade weapon. In fact, it could even be compared to a trash gold-grade weapon. If he used higher-grade talisman stones and higher-grade materials, the talisman equipment would be even more powerful. Now, Great Qin did not lack any blue-grade materials at all, as they had bronze concentrate mines. Silver-grade materials could be bought from other regions, plundered from other system main cities, and killed other creatures. Great Qin also had some gold-grade materials. Great Qin did not lack any blue-grade materials at all. However, it was difficult to obtain talisman stones. Normally, talisman stones were quite rare, and Zhao Fu had only bought 150,000 talisman stones from 100 or so regions. Most of them were white-grade talisman stones, and he only had 1,000 or so blue-grade talisman stones. Chapter 589. High-grade talisman stones and high-grade materials could create talisman equipment that would be even more powerful. Thinking about his soldiers, each of them wielding a legendary grade weapon, they would be able to kill anything that stood in their way. However, it was impossible for him to do that right now, so Zhao Fu returned the sword to Shi Qianhua and ordered him to create 150,000 pieces of talisman equipment for his soldiers before considering anything else. By now, the truth-harming talismans and talisman equipment were being created, and Zhao Fu felt much more at ease. Another day passed, and another piece of good news came. Qin had discovered a small city, and it was an elf city. This elf city was deep within a forest, and it was very difficult for ordinary people to discover it. There were 210,000 elves, which was quite ordinary. Elves did not enslave other races, so there were only elves in the elf city. However, in terms of strength, this city's battle strength was many times that of the Kobold city. This was because not only did this city have powerful archers, but it also had cavalry. They used a type of giant deer as their mount. These giant deer were similar to the orcs' giant wolves, and they had been bred using special methods. Not only were they twice as big as normal deer, but they were also very powerful and could easily carry 2 people on their backs as they ran. Moreover, their antlers were large and sharp, and anyone who was hit by them would feel quite uncomfortable. Apart from cavalry and archers, the elves also had mages. Even though there were not many of them, they could still deal some damage, and they also had healing skills. There was also a special type of soldier within their infantry. Zhao Fu did not know what they were, but they were quite powerful. All of them wore silver clothes and held silver swords, and they gave off a holy and dignified aura. Finally, there was something else. The elf city had a very tall and lush tree, which was most likely the tree of life. It gave elves some buffs, such as increasing their recovery speed and healing effects when they were injured. With so many stats added together, the elf city's battle strength was not any weaker than the orc cities, and its defenses were even stronger than the orc cities. Orcs and elves had relatively high statuses among outlanders, and they were not people that the kobolds and goblins could compare to. They also had many legacies, so they were quite powerful. However, in front of Great Qin, all of this was nothing. Great Qin could easily destroy it. In fact, Zhao Fu could not even be bothered to bring a single soldier, and he directly brought 21 city lords above the elf city. A massive and terrifying aura covered the elf city, causing all of the elves to fall into terror. Their bodies instinctively trembled as they looked up at the godlike 20 or so people in the sky. Zhao Fu looked at the handsome elf below and did not waste any words as he said, "I'll give you 2 choices. Surrender, and I'll give you 2 options. You can either surrender or slaughter the entire city." The handsome young man's expression was very unsightly, and he was hesitating. The elves around him were divided into 2 factions. "City Lord. Let's fight it out with them. I don't believe that the 200,000 people in the elf city will be afraid of just 20 of them," an elf said angrily. "Master King Elf City Lord City. No, the other side has 21 city lords, and if we fight, we'll definitely lose. Let's just surrender. You also have Outlander city lords in the sky, which means that this person definitely won't torture us." An elderly elf hurriedly tried to persuade them. Zhao Fu had to wait for their reply in the air. Zhao Fu did not like killing, or else he would not have asked them if they wanted to surrender. However, since they had chosen to resist, Zhao Fu could only start a massacre. After all, he had given them a choice. Zhao Fu planned to give this city lord seal to Daisy when he returned. After a while, Zhao Fu still did not receive a reply. Seeing that the elf city was determined to resist to the death, a large number of archers arrived, and the commoners picked up their bows and arrows. Zhao Fu did not say anything else and directly said, "Kill the city lords. If any commoners resist, kill them as well." The other city lords obeyed Zhao Fu's orders, and even more intense auras exploded out, sweeping through the elf city like a tornado. Countless trees madly swayed, and some stones and roofs were blown into the sky. They were about to listen to Zhao Fu's orders and start a massacre. However, at that moment a gentle voice sounded out, "Master, can you wait? Can you wait a moment? Those are my clansmen, and I want to persuade them as well." Swish, 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 the sound of the air being torn could be heard as countless arrows containing immense force shot into the sky from below, creating a shocking scene. Boom! Boom. Boom. Qin Town's city lords unleashed their city lord seals, causing terrifying power to spread out as the city lords worked together to create a barrier. Countless arrows hit the barrier like raindrops, but they were all deflected. Not a single arrow broke through the barrier, and instead, a rain of arrows descended, scaring countless elves into finding cover. A trace of disdain appeared on Zhao Fu's face. How could 80,000 to 90,000 arrows break through the defenses of 20 or so city lords? Without 400,000 to 500,000 arrows, it would be impossible to break through the defenses of 20 or so city lords. Hearing Celia's words, Zhao Fu had wanted to stop and give them a chance. However, since they had taken the initiative to attack, Zhao Fu would not hold back, and his gaze became cold as he yelled, "Kill!" The 20 or so figures in the sky turned into rays of light as they shot towards the elf city. 10 of the city lords directly attacked the elf city lord, while the remaining city lords attacked the countless elf soldiers and civilians. Celia did not say anything, and a trace of sadness appeared on her face as she felt quite uncomfortable. She had the elf royal bloodline, and she was very close to the Tree of Life and the elves. She had wanted to use her status to persuade them, and perhaps they would surrender. However, it seemed that it was impossible, as Zhao Fu had already given the order. The 10 city lords attacked the elf city lord, and they unleashed their most powerful attack. Even though the elf city lord did his best to defend, he was still heavily injured. The other city lords charged into the crowd and unleashed terrifying attack. Saber lights and sword lights flew everywhere as explosions continuously sounded out. Massive shockwaves blasted out, causing buildings to collapse and the ground to crack. Cries of pain and blood continuously flowed out. Facing the city lords' attacks, the Stage 1 soldiers were able to resist, but the civilians were unable to resist at all and continuously died. However, the city lords mostly attacked the elf soldiers and did not slaughter the civilians. There were roughly 60,000 elf soldiers in the elf city, and only a few of them were killed in a short while. With the power of 21 city lords, if Zhao Fu went to attack a system main city, it would be incredibly difficult for that system main city to defend, let alone a basic city. However, Zhao Fu did not dare to directly attack a system main city, as he was afraid that they would ally together. Right now, Qin did not have the strength to deal with a few regions, so it was best to keep a low profile and wait until he cleared out the 4 regions. Chapter 590. Zhao Fu sensed Celia's emotions and said in a comforting tone, "Don't worry. As long as they're willing to surrender, I won't kill them all." Celia felt a warmth in her heart and came out of the sword mark. She happily hugged Zhao Fu and smiled as she said, Thank you, master." Seeing how shy she looked, Zhao Fu smiled and stroked her hair. Seeing this, Long Xiaoxiao thought to herself and came out of the sword mark. She rubbed her large left chest and pretended to be in pain as she said, "Master, I'm also in pain, I want a hug." As she spoke, Long Xiaoxiao leapt at Zhao Fu, but Zhao Fu pushed her away and said, "Forget it." Long Xiaoxiao could only look at Zhao Fu begrudgingly, and Celia's face was bright red as she returned to the sword mark. Long Xiaoxiao stayed behind and hugged Zhao Fu's hand. However, she kept hugging Zhao Fu's hand and burrowing into his clothes, and only after Zhao Fu knocked her on the head did she stop. By now, the battle had concluded. The elf city lord had been pierced through the heart by Meng Tian's spear and died, and the other soldiers had resisted for a bit before being suppressed. The elf city seal was a wooden seal with elves carved on it. There were originally 210,000 elves, but only 100,000 remained. 90,000 of them were civilians and 10,000 were soldiers. Zhao Fu did not care about this and went to the city to look at the things he was interested in. The first was the elf city's barrack. Zhao Fu did not look at the basic military professions and only looked at the 2 professions. Deer Cavalry. D- grade military description. the elf race's exclusive cavalry, and they are suited for fighting in forests. Effect: every player will receive Elven Valor. Divine Tree Warrior. B- grade military description. The guardian warriors of the Divine Tree, and they have powerful Divine Tree power. Effect: everyone receives Tree of Life power. After looking at the elf cavalry's stats, Zhao Fu felt that they were quite good. Qin could be nurtured so that Qin's army could adapt to different battlefield. The Divine Tree Warriors were the soldiers wearing silver equipment and holding silver swords. Their strength could rival Stage 2 soldiers, and they were quite powerful. They were even stronger than ordinary Stage 2 soldiers. As expected of a B class. This class also had a limit. There were only 500 of them, which was quite a small number. However, the number of Divine Tree Warriors depended on the Tree of Life. The taller the tree was, the more Divine Tree Warriors could change professions. Following this, Zhao Fu came to a tree that was 10 or so meters tall. The tree was 2 meters wide, and had a lush canopy that spread out like an umbrella. The tree gave off a faint green light and an aura of life. Tree, a level 1 fairy race's Tree of Life. It has the tree and has and it Qin Fu's leaves. Zhao Fu could bring this tree back, and if he could plant it in large numbers, he could nurture a group of Divine Tree Warriors. This profession was quite ferocious in battle. Following this, Zhao Fu gave the order to start digging, and they came to a denver. This den was quite similar to the den in the Orc City. There was a stage made of bricks, and there was a green crystal floating above it. Giant Deer Den, Basic Town, Grade, Gold Description, a special den fused with an elf blood crystal and a deer denver. It can spawn 45 to 75 giant deer every day. After looking at the den's stats, Zhao Fu relocated the elf city. This elf city was an intermediate basic city, and he obtained 420,000 EXP, 40 war points, and 2,000 achievement points. Zhao Fu brought the elves back to Qin and rebuilt the elf city. He gave the elf city seal to Daisy and made her the city lord. Zhao Fu did not care about anything else, and he ordered people to plant the Tree of Life. He felt quite worried, as he did not know if it would survive after being transplanted, and he was also worried about how to get the Tree of Life saplings. Zhao Fu remembered that some trees could be directly planted in the ground, and they would sprout and grow into a new tree. However, ordinary trees would still bear fruit and grow seed. Zhao Fu did not know much about the Tree of Life, so he asked Celia about it. Zhao Fu found out that the Tree of Life would bear 5 fruits of life every 10 years. These fruits of life could be consumed to obtain massive amounts of life force and heal countless injuries. At the same time, they could be planted in the ground, and a new Tree of Life would grow. Of course, the Tree of Life had different grades. The higher the grade of the Tree of Life, the more powerful it would be, and the longer it would take for it to bear fruits of life. The Tree of Life that Zhao Fu had obtained was only level 1, so it would bear 5 fruits of life every 10 years. However, 10 years was too long, and Zhao Fu could not afford to wait. Who knew what would happen in 10 years? As such, Zhao Fu decided to give up on the idea of nurturing a large number of Divine Tree Warriors. At that moment, Celia said that if he had Water of Life, he could catalyze the growth of the Tree of Life. Moreover, if he planted the Tree of Life's branches on the ground and watered them with Water of Life, there was a chance that they would grow. However, Zhao Fu knew about Water of Life because it was a very famous and precious item. Even in the elf race, it was quite rare, and it was usually obtained in drop. This was because it had an extremely powerful life force and was a holy medicine for healing injuries. It was rumored that only the elf kingdom could produce a small amount of Water of Life, so it was impossible for Zhao Fu to produce Water of Life. Zhao Fu sighed, and just as he was about to give up, the golden dragon within his body said, "I know of a special method to create Water of Life." Hearing this, Zhao Fu felt quite delighted and rejoiced. Obtaining the golden dragon's information was equivalent to obtaining a massive treasure trove. What method? Zhao Fu asked. The golden dragon quickly replied, Water of life is a very good healing item, and our Heaven Murder Empire uses it to heal injuries. However, water of life is indeed quite rare, even among the elves. However, our Heaven Murder Empire has a monstrous genius who created a special method to create water of life. Because Zhao Fu had the information from God Kerr, he knew how precious water of life was, and he couldn't help but think to himself, the Heaven Murder Empire is simply too extravagant. Ordinary soldiers use water of life to heal injuries. Zhao Fu did not think too much about it and asked, What special method is it? Chapter 591. World Tree Seeds? That's an incredibly rare item. The World Tree is the final form of the Tree of Life, and its seeds can directly grow into high-grade trees of life. Normally, the Elf Empire wouldn't leak this information. 5 trees of life wasn't much, but Zhao Fu knew that it would be quite difficult to obtain World Tree seeds. If he couldn't obtain them, he would have to use ordinary trees of life seeds. Is that all? You can produce a large amount of water of life just like that? Zhao Fu asked. Of course not. We need to put a large number of corpses into the well of life to produce more water of life. The golden dragon replied. After hearing this, Zhao Fu realized that this fountain of life was turning corpses into water of life, which was quite evil. However, Zhao Fu wasn't against it. With the water of life's effects, it would reduce the deaths of countless soldiers, which was incredibly important to Qin City. It was just that the materials would be quite difficult to obtain. Qin City now had 1 tree of life, so he was still lacking 4. As for the corpses, there was no need to worry about them. Qin City had obtained many corpses every day from clearing out regions. Most of the corpses didn't even have stage 1 corpses, and their grades were quite bad, so they were basically useless. If they could be put into the fountain of life, they would be able to make good use of them. After conquering the Elf City, Zhao Fu didn't have much to do. He wanted to manage the internal affairs of the city, but he found that there wasn't much to see. Whether it was production or construction, everything was done in an orderly manner, and there were specialized people to manage everything. The 4 main roads were quickly constructed, but because Qin City had unified the Xianyang region, the 4 roads had to be extended so that they could traverse the entire Xianyang region. Qin City was now just like an ordinary system main city, and it was incredibly lively and prosperous. In terms of production, it was the same as before. Most of the food was stored, so there were many granaries. Fruits could be sold, consumed, or made into wine. In terms of management, there were also people who taught them how to manage villages and cities. There were also people who taught them how to manage people before being given positions. Because of Zhao Fu's injuries, he could not go anywhere. Even though he had recovered some of his strength, he still could not protect himself and needed many people to accompany him. Zhao Fu did not want that, so he could only stay within the territory. This was quite boring, and Zhao Fu decided that he could not continue like this. As such, he decided to send Qin as an assassin to the various regions to capture women with Phoenix Qi so that he could heal his injuries. Qin's assassins obeyed Zhao Fu's orders and snuck into system main cities like ghosts, searching for women with Phoenix Qi. Zhao Fu could only wait in the city lord's mansion. He also took the opportunity to take a look at the 3 guards he was nurturing, Gaoli, Moni, and Joyce. They were also the inheritors of the Silver Lake Immortal. Right now, their strength was still relatively low, but they could still use some of the power of the concept. Because Gaoli was a city lord, even though she had only used the Silver Lake Immortal equipment for a short period of time, she was still able to quickly activate its power. The sword Qi that she sent out was incredibly sharp, and it contained the power of the concept. Cutting through rocks was like cutting through tofu to her. Moni was a Xiongnu woman, and when she swung her saber, she was quite ferocious and gave off a wild aura. This was a racial talent, and Zhao Fu quite liked this kind of woman. Even though her relationship with Zhao Fu had been quite tense and cold when she had been forced to submit, after such a long time, their relationship had improved. Even when Zhao Fu hugged her and touched her important parts, she did not resist. As for Joyce, he used a bow, so each of his arrows was incredibly sharp and powerful. A full-powered arrow could pierce through a 2-meter-thick wall. Apart from these things, Zhao Fu also started to worry about the border regions. Right now, the only border region that Qin could go to was the border region of Vietnam. The rewards for this transfer of fate were quite good, but considering the losses, Zhao Fu did not plan to participate. His main task was to clear out the 4 regions. Before, Qin had established a massive faction, which was the Vietnamese Guard. It was a faction that focused on patriotism and defending the country. At first, Qin had wanted to greatly support the Vietnamese Guard and have it devour all of Vietnam. However, as Qin's strategy changed, the resources that supported the Vietnamese Guard greatly decreased. However, after such a long time, the Vietnamese Guard's foundation was still quite firm, and it was loved and worshipped by countless Vietnamese players. Now there were 3 million Vietnamese players, and as the leader of the Vietnamese Guard, Lai Chien-chien had become the most popular woman in Vietnam. Countless celebrities and nobles treated her with respect, and when the ordinary people saw how beautiful Lai Chien-chien was, they all viewed her as a goddess and passionately liked her. Thus, she was pursued by countless people. Zhao Fu did not support or oppose the invasion of China, and he simply did what needed to be done. Right now, the only border region that was not at war was North Vietnam. This was because all of the players in those 2 regions were controlled by Qin. More accurately speaking, Qin Zhao controlled the cores of the 2 alliances. Before, Qin had led both sides and created their own alliances. He would then get rid of those who did not want to participate, and he would then get rid of those who disobeyed him. In the end, he would firmly control both alliances. As for the other regions, Zhao Fu could not completely control them, so he would do what needed to be done. The Vietnamese Guard could use this opportunity to infiltrate into Vietnam and gain even more power. Now, Qin did not lack resources at all, and he could provide them to the Vietnamese Guard, allowing it to develop and secretly control Vietnam. This was something that everyone was quite excited about, as this was secretly controlling an entire country. Zhao Fu was not stingy at all, and he gave a large amount of resources to Lai Chien-chien so that she could continue to develop and become stronger. Moreover, through killing creatures, Qin had obtained many border medallions. These border medallions could allow one to go to border regions, but there were restrictions. For example, if one obtained a border medallion in the southern part of the Midland continent, it could only go to the southern border, and it would be a one-way trip. The chaotic world stone steel could also be exchanged for border medallions. Advanced border medallions could allow one to go back and forth, while peak border medallions could allow one to go to any border, provided that one was in one's own country. These border medallions were not very useful to Zhao Fu, so they could be sold. Zhao Fu did not have any plans to participate in the war. After dealing with these matters, another day passed. Qin's assassins performed quite well, and they captured 11 women. Chapter 592. All of a sudden, many good-looking women were scared and didn't dare to go out. The rumor became more and more terrible. It was said that Qin's crown prince was promiscuous and had thousands of women in a day. Now he was seriously short of women, so he ordered his soldiers to capture beautiful women for his pleasure. Now, 7,000 or so female players had been captured by Great Qin's soldiers and given to Great Qin's legatee to enjoy. They were such good women, but they had to endure Great Qin's legatee's abuse every day. Countless people were talking about it, especially the male comrades who were angry. Why didn't he have that ability? Countless women directly cursed. Pervert. Animal. Animal with lower body. Pervert. Bastard. Zhao Fu was also a little surprised. The rumor was too exaggerated. Qin had only captured 11 women. How could it become more than 7,000? Besides, Qin's assassins were very secretive, so they shouldn't be discovered. Even if they were discovered, they might not think that it was Qin who did it. Someone must have spread the rumor. But when Zhao Fu saw the information of the 11 women, he completely understood. The first woman Qin caught was a member of Huayu. Zhao Fu didn't do it on purpose. Huayu must be mad now. After capturing the first person, Flower Moon had tried everything they could to save their people, but they had not succeeded. Zhao Fu did not accept any of their conditions, but they had not given up and had tried to work together in exchange for their people. However, before they could save the first woman, the second one was caught by Qin. Huayu immediately wanted to argue with Zhao Fu, but they didn't even get to see Zhao Fu. Now, they couldn't save the first two, and the third one was caught by Qin. How could they not be angry? In addition to the members of Huayu, this time Qin also caught many influential people, such as the most famous Twilight Girls in Huaxia. The Twilight Girls was composed of 8 members, each of whom was 17 or 18 years old. They were all very beautiful, and they were also versatile. They were loved by many people for their dancing and singing. Out of all the girl groups in the country, they were the most popular and popular. But now, 6 of the 8 of them had been captured by Qin, leaving only 2 members of the Twilight Girls troupe. They would definitely disband. Countless people would be heartbroken that they would never see the Twilight Girls troupe again. There was another woman who also received a lot of attention. She was the wife of a male star. That male star must be very famous in China. Because they had just divorced, she received a lot of attention. In the end, there was also a famous female host who was also captured. Capturing so many influential people at once definitely attracted a lot of attention, so the impact of this matter was very big. However, Zhao Fu didn't care about it. He ordered people to bring them all to him. First, the woman from Huayu was 23 or 24 years old. She was very pretty and had delicate skin. Now, she was looking at Zhao Fu angrily. Her name was LV Nanlei. Then, there were the 6 girls from the Twilight Girls troupe. They all had delicate facial features and were very beautiful. They were about the same height and had different temperaments. They all looked around in fear. Their names were Zhao Shuxian, Yan Minghuai, Zhuananqin, Bailvai, Long Pei'er and Xia Xiaoyao. Then, there was the divorced woman. She was beautiful, tall, and had fair skin. She had a sexy temperament. Her name was Zheng Lindy. Then, there was a female host. When Zhao Fu was working, he had seen her on TV, so he knew her. She had a good face and was about 27 years old. She was an intellectual, mature woman. Her name was Yi Qiuxia. Now, there were 9 people, and there were 2 left. One was the big miss of a large family. She looked quite delicate and had tears streaming down her face. Her name was Zhang Yingying. Finally, there was a gentle and quiet girl. She was not very old and was most likely still in school. Her name was Qi Wenli. When she had first seen Zhao Fu, she had knelt down and begged Zhao Fu to spare her. She said that she came from a village, that her father was disabled, and that her family relied on her mother. Her family was waiting for her to study and find a good job to take care of the family, so she could not stay here. Zhao Fu looked at her. Her words didn't seem to be fake, but she had already consumed a reality fruit and could not return to the real world. However, Zhao Fu promised to give her family a large sum of money as compensation. Qi Wenli was incredibly grateful to Zhao Fu and expressed that she was willing to become Zhao Fu's woman. In actuality, no matter what, they would not be able to resist. However, if they were willing, Zhao Fu would be happy. Following this, they were all conferred titles. The 11 of them all gave off golden phoenix chi that could condense into mist. It was quite shocking, and they all entered the Emperor Phoenix statue. The Emperor Phoenix once again appeared and gave off a pleasant cry. Zhao Fu's injuries quickly recovered, and with the phoenix chi from these 11 women and the fate from before, most of Zhao Fu's injuries had recovered, and he could now use half of his strength. System announcement. Qin's legatee's injuries are recovering, and Qin's fate is also recovering, causing China's fate to start recovering. The fate transfer has slowed down. System announcement. Due to the slowing down of the fate transfer, the bonuses have been reduced. Foreigners attacking Chinese people will only receive 4 times the rewards and a small amount of fate. System announcement. China's fate is recovering, and once it fully recovers, the fate transfer will stop. No one had expected that Qin would be so important to this battle. Everything had started with Qin, and everything had been destroyed by Qin. As long as Qin's fate recovered and Qin's legatee's injuries were healed, this battle would end. Zhao Fu had never thought that his injuries and Qin's injuries would be so important to China. Everyone else felt quite confused, as they had never thought that this would end the battle. What should we do? Help Qin recover his fate? And help Qin recover? Countless dynasty legatees and factions' expressions became quite unsightly. They had tried so hard not to heavily injure Qin, but this was the result. The other foreign factions were also quite shocked. Before, they had received 5 times the rewards, but now it had been reduced to 4 times. If Qin recovered, their rewards would decrease, and if Qin fully recovered, the massive fate transfer would stop. When that time came, China's situation would become the same as the other continents, with countries fighting each other. Without high rewards, no one would attack China. When that time came, their massive invasion would end in failure, and they would have to face China's terrifying retaliation. The outcome would be unimaginable. Chapter 593. In actuality, the place where Zhao Fu was currently was not the true Heaven Awakened world. The true Heaven Awakened world was a vast and boundless world. The place where Zhao Fu was now was called the Legacy Land. Just like its name suggested, the Legacy Land was a place to receive all sorts of legacies. These legacies were historical legacies, such as the legacies of various dynasties and families. Every century, the Heaven Awakened world would devour some worlds into the Heaven Awakened world. In order to prevent new worlds from being slaughtered, they had set up a protected area, which was the Legacy Land. The Legacy Land was not only a place to receive legacies but also a place to protect newcomers. It protected the newcomers and allowed them to receive all sorts of legacies, allowing them to develop and defend against outside factions. The heavenly domain boundary was the barrier that protected the Legacy Land. If the heavenly domain boundary disappeared, the Legacy Land would truly fuse with the Heaven Awakened world. Only then would the world be called the Heaven Awakened world, and now it was called the Legacy Land. It was like a very large map with a small pellet that was protected by a semicircle. That was what it meant. The Legacy Land was at the boundary of the Heaven Awakened world, and because the Heaven Awakened world continuously devoured worlds, it became larger. Some devoured worlds would naturally appear at the boundary, continuously increasing the Heaven Awakened world's size. There were great benefits to being at the boundary of the Heaven Awakened world, and because the Heaven Awakened world would continuously devour worlds, it would continuously become larger. Some devoured worlds would naturally appear at the boundary, continuously increasing the Heaven Awakened world's size. How could someone who had only been in the Heaven Awakened world for a few years fight against a faction that had developed for tens of thousands of years? They would be completely suppressed and would not be able to resist at all. Zhao Fu found out from the demon god's information that most people in the Heaven Awakened world, called the boundary regions, not only did they not have much fate but they also did not have many benefits. As such, most ancient factions would not make a move against these boundary regions. This was why the boundary regions, countless kingdoms, and worlds had been able to avoid calamities. If there was any danger, it would be the worlds that had been devoured in the previous century. They had developed for at least a few decades, and even though they were weaker than others, dealing with people from a new world like Zhao Fu was quite simple. The ancient powers looked down on desolate border regions, but others were quite envious, because not only could they obtain large amounts of fate, they could also obtain countless slaves and resources. Slavery was quite common in the Heaven-Awakened world, and most of them were conquered kingdoms and races. Very few people would accept people from other worlds as they were xenophobic. As such, those who conquered them would only see them as slaves and not subject. Zhao Fu had said before that after the Heaven-Awakened world devoured the real world, there would be a catastrophe, which was the invasion of other worlds. Others had developed for decades, while others had only developed for a few years. It was evident that they were at a disadvantage. Just like the genocide mentioned before and the enslavement of countless people, this was not Zhao Fu's exaggeration. This was something that would really happen. Most of the people in the Legacy Land didn't know about these things. The chaotic world was a cruel environment to train people's resistance. At this time, they could revive infinitely, but when the time came, they would be dead, and there would be no more chances. Now, it was forbidden to talk about the Legacy Land because if they did, it would cause panic and they would not be able to develop according to the Heaven-Awakened world's plans. If everyone in the world knew about this, they would definitely make preparations, and the Heaven-Awakened world would think that they had made preparations and closed the Heaven Domain boundary ahead of time. When that time came, even if they made sufficient preparations, they would not have enough time and would still be easily destroyed. As such, the Heaven-Awakened world nurtured a group of experts to ensure that the new world would not be easily destroyed. As for the weak, they would become nourishment for the experts and defend against the invasions of other worlds. Before, Zhao Fu had heard the black and white impermanences and Oxhead and Horseface mention the Legacy Land, but they had not been able to say it, as they would receive a system announcement. Luckily, Zhao Fu had not relied on them and had instead devoured a demon godly spirit's divinity to obtain some information from the outside world. Otherwise, he would have been kept in the dark and would only have found out when the Heaven-Awakened world devoured the real world. Now, everyone in this region, no matter what race, nationality, or skin color they were called humans, and humans represented everyone on Earth. The other worlds also had similar names. Humans were unique to Earth, and it was the same for the other new world. Zhao Fu did not know how many races existed next to humans, as they had only been devoured in the last century. It had not been that long, so Zhao Fu and the Golden Dragon did not know. The demon god could not remember everything, as it was only a weak godly spirit. Right now, the outside world was filled with unknowns, and if Zhao Fu could go to the outside world, he would have an advantage over the rest of the world. As mentioned before, this was quite important to Qin. The Heaven Domain stone that Zhao Fu had obtained in the past could be used to break open the Heaven Domain boundary. Boundary iron was an essential material for opening doors to other worlds, and strengthening spatial stones could increase spatial power. What Zhao Fu had been waiting for this entire time was the transboundary teleportation channel, which could allow a person to travel across a world, and he could only exchange for it after the chaotic world stone steel reached level 6. The reason why Zhao Fu had always been saving war points was because he wanted to exchange for transboundary teleportation channels. These things were incredibly expensive, and he would not be able to exchange for them even if he spent a few war points. In actuality, Zhao Fu was quite eager to personally see what the Heaven-Awakened world was like, and he wanted to know how strong his enemies were in the future. He wanted to make preparations so that when they invaded, Qin would not be able to retaliate at all. This was the reason why Zhao Fu wanted to quickly establish a kingdom. Only by establishing a kingdom would he have a trace of resistance, or else he would not be able to resist at all. Right now, no matter how intense the battles within the legacy land were, it was meaningless. Zhao Fu was quite clear about his enemies in the future, so he had to make preparations to defend against them. Zhao Fu was not as short-sighted as the other legatees. Fighting between them was a form of internal strife, but this was good as well. After all, even a group of sheep was not as strong as a ferocious tiger. The weak did not deserve to live in this world. The world was just that cruel. Moreover, China occupied the Midland continent, which was the center of the legacy land, which was also beneficial because the invasions would definitely start from other continents. Zhao Fu did not know what the future would be like. He did not know how many people would die, how many races would be destroyed, and how many kingdoms would disappear. In front of a battle between worlds, Zhao Fu was still as weak as an ant. The Golden Dragon was right. The human world was only a low-leveled world, and there were higher-leveled worlds and legacies. The human world was actually quite weak. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.